What's up? Ghost Fictions is here, and we're back again. This is the second part of a story where Issei was betrayed and went for revenge. But before we start, please consider subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Don't forget to check the description for more informations. Now, let's get into part 2. Winters are harsh in Japan, especially in its northernmost prefecture, Hokkaido. Much of its plant life withers away, and most of the wildlife goes into hiding. Add in the fact that temperatures are freezing and the terrain is mountainous, few can call this place home. However, some forms of life stubbornly survive in these harsh conditions. A deer jumped out of some nearby shriveled bushes, trotting towards a riverbank that practically froze over. Desperately looking for a place to drink, it spotted one in the middle of the river. Swiftly walking, but also careful not to slip on the ice, the deer reached the hole in the ice, sipping the freezing water. Unbeknownst to the deer, its life was coming to an end. Coming from the same direction as the deer, a figure emerged from out of the snowstorm. The figure had tracked the deer to this point and was certain it was near. The figure walked closer to the edge of the clearing as the snow crunched underneath its feet. As it reached the river, it turned out to be a hooded man dressed in fur clothing, armed with a bow and arrow. Determining that he was close enough, the man grabbed the bow off his back and crouched down to make himself more difficult to see. Firmly grasping the bow, he pulled an arrow out from his quiver, resting the front of the arrow on his right hand while holding the back of it with his left. Pulling the string back, he prepared himself, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the deer finished drinking the water, it lifted its head and started to walk away from the hunter. Wasting no time, the man let his arrow loose. Even with the howling wind in his ears, he could distinctly hear the arrow whistling through it. The arrow traveled through the air, quickly making it to its destination. The deer's neck. The deer instantly went into shock, jumping and squealing as the arrow lodged into its neck. The deer started to run downstream, but ended up collapsing onto the ice, sliding a little further until coming to a complete stop. Heavily exhaling through his nose, the man stood up, sheathing his bow. When he secured it onto his back, he walked over to the edge of the frozen river. Testing if it would hold his weight, he cautiously stepped onto the ice. While it did make some visible cracks, it supported him. The man carefully started walking over the ice, with each step creating new cracks along it. Reaching the deer, he knelt to pick it up. Throwing the deer over his shoulders, he carefully made his way back to the side of the river they both originated from. After making it back with relative ease, the man walked back into the woods, beginning the long trek home. Despite the fact the walk was indeed long, to the man, it only felt like minutes. One moment he was at the river and the next he was entering another clearing in the woods. Stepping into the small clearing, a cabin was visible in the center of it. It was a simple wooden cabin with a set of stairs and a small porch connecting to the front door. On the side of the cabin, the roof extends past the main house. Held up by a couple of wooden posts, the awning covered a stack of chopped pieces of wood for making fires with. On the other side of the cabin, a small farm was visible. However, nothing was planted since it was the peak of winter, and anything planted would die almost instantly. Walking towards the cabin, the man felt the wind pick up significantly. Looking up to the sky, he mumbled to himself in a deep voice. "The storm's coming." Swiftly walking, he chose to bring the deer inside with him. Normally, he would butcher his food outside. However, with it already snowing heavily and an impending blizzard fastly approaching, he had no choice but to bring the deer inside with him. Walking up the few stairs and across the porch, the man opened the door, entered the cabin, and closed the door behind him. Securing the door to make sure it wouldn't swing open during the storm, the man turned around to face his home. It was essentially one gigantic room with various sections in it. A huge fire pit sat in the center of the cabin. It was not only for cooking food but also light and warmth. Two wooden posts sat on either side of the fire pit with a V-like formation at the top. A metal skewer rested on those two posts to hold the man's meat. A couple of stools were placed around the fire pit to sit and eat the food that was cooked there. A hatch was visible on the roof which was accessible via ladder, allowing the man to let out the smoke. Normally it would be open when cooking, but with the heavy storm, he had to keep it closed. Near the front of the cabin, various shelves, cabinets, and various other storing containers for all the man's tools and other belongings. On the far side of the cabin sat a simple desk and chair with a book and several pieces of paper littered around it. There was also a purple gem resting on the desk as well. There also was a bed that was in the corner. While the frame was made of wood, the bed itself was made from hay with various animal hides covering it with a white cotton blanket on top. Lastly, the floorboard in front of the bed was able to be taken out. The secret compartment stored one of man's most priceless belongings. Tossing the deer onto the floor, the man walked over to the fire pit to illuminate the dark cabin, the floorboard slightly creaking as he did so. Kneeling, the man picked up two sticks he got from outside before going hunting. Setting one on top of the other, he started rubbing them together to create a fire. However, both of them were still extremely cold and wet from sitting out in the snow, which gave the man a hard time even getting smoke. Getting frustrated, he thought of lighting the fire himself, but in the end, he decided against it. Giving it one more try, the man was able to see smoke coming off the stick. Placing it gently on the stack of wood in the pit, the man gently blew onto the stick. After a few blows, the smoke turned into embers, which ignited the rest of the wood. The flame quickly grew in size until it took up the entire space of the pit. As the size of the fire grew, so did the light in the cabin. Succeeding in warming up his home, the man took off his coat and put down his bow, revealing his appearance. He had spiky brown hair with a ponytail running down his back. He also possessed the physique of an Olympic swimmer or track runner, having lean muscle all over his body. But by far, his most noticeable feature was his eyes. His left eye was a piercing, almost ominous golden color. His right eye, however, was completely milky white. So much to the point, it was almost impossible to tell the pupil, iris, and sclera apart. His last defining feature was a long, slightly slanted scar that went over his right eye, starting at the top of his forehead and ending near the middle of his right cheek. He was the savior and the betrayer of the supernatural, the former Red Dragon Emperor. Issei Haidu. Blankly staring into the fire, Issei thought about everything that has led to this moment. It had been 30 years since that day happened. 30 years since his family betrayed him. 30 years since his best friend sacrificed himself. 30 years since his entire life crumbled before him. It still made his heart ache to this day just thinking about it. He would never be able to forgive them for what they had done to him. Nevertheless, Issei learned to move on with his life. However, it didn't change the fact that he was both physically and emotionally scarred by the event. Physically, aside from his blinded eye, he had various scars all over his body. Many of which came from his former brother-in-law Surzich's and when he hit the sharp rocks of the ravine. Back then, in his weakened state, Issei had never felt more pain in his life. But eventually, all that pain went away. Emotionally, it was a different story. Emotionally, Issei had never truly recovered from the betrayal, and the wounds have never fully healed. He doubted they ever will, especially after so long. How could he? Everything was going great. He had a bevy of beauties, they had stopped the villainous Rizavum and were ready for another era of peace. Until they decided to betray him and Drake. Over the years, Issei had worked on controlling his emotions, refusing to let them cloud his judgment. However, every time he thought of the Welsh dragon, he couldn't help but find himself sentimental about the loss of his friend. He was someone that Issei felt more comfortable sharing his thoughts and feelings with than anyone. Since, well, he was there from the very beginning. From the moment Issei was born into this world, the Dragon of Domination watched over him, long before Issei even awakened the boosted gear. So it wasn't a surprise to him that he felt comfortable confiding in the heavenly dragon. But now, he's gone. After Drake sacrificed himself, Issei's connection to the boosted gear was completely severed, including, of course, Drake. Hell, Issei wouldn't be surprised if the boosted gear ceased to exist now because of his friend's sacrifice. When Issei found this out years ago, he wasn't upset to lose the sacred gear itself, but to have truly lost the soul that dwelled within. Regardless, Issei knew he had to move on and continue his life without Drake, but this came with ramifications that Issei hadn't thought about. Without Drake, Issei lost all the powers he gained from the boosted gear, as well as all his devil powers, when his pieces were extracted. This caused Issei to lose the majority of his magic reserves and lose his devil status. However, Issei was still a dragon due to his body being made from Great Red's flesh, making him a humanoid dragon. Honestly, even though Drake sacrificed himself, Issei knew it was a miracle that he survived. His chances of survival were incredibly low, let alone his chances of escaping the underworld. Drake could have sacrificed himself for nothing. However, despite his astronomically low odds, he survived. He didn't miss a single person that he was close with. Well, that was a lie. There was a person he missed. In fact, there were two. He missed his parents profoundly. He hoped they were doing alright. He knew those devils told lies about his betrayal and untimely death. However, he also knew that it was extremely unlikely that they would kill his parents, but no doubt keep them in the dark about the truth about their son. Issei wanted to do nothing more than go back to Kuo. He wanted to tell his parents he was okay. He wanted to tell them that it was the angels and devils that betrayed him. He wanted to fill the holes in their hearts that he knew were there. But he couldn't. As much as he wanted to, he couldn't go. If he were to go to Kuo and angels and devils found out, he'd risk his parents' safety. While he could easily defend himself, his parents had no defenses whatsoever. They could be used to force Issei out of hiding. His parents could be detained, tortured, or even worse. He knew what his former comrades were like, especially the leaders. They would scour every inch of the underworld, the earth, and the dimensional gap to find him. It was simply too much of a risk for Issei to take. So, he decided against it. Even though it pained him to say it, this was the right choice. Lamenting, Issei turned to chop up the deer until he heard a voice. "Are you alright, Issei?" The voice boomed through the whole cabin, but it didn't startle Issei, not in the slightest. He knew exactly where it came from and who was speaking. On the desk, the purple gem glowed as the voice emanated from it. The voice came from someone Issei knew far too well. He had been with Issei for the majority of his isolation and was the only other being Issei has spoken with for decades. The voice belonged to a fellow dragon, the Golden Dragon King Fafnir to be exact. Years ago, when Issei found the dragon, he discovered that he was once again sealed into the gem of the Downfall Dragon Spear. He spent almost an entire year trying to break the seal. Alas, he was only able to break half the seal, resulting in Fafnir only being able to communicate and allowing Issei to wield Fafnir's abilities. He couldn't leave the sacred gear at will anymore, he was bound to it. Nevertheless, Fafnir was grateful for Issei's efforts and offered to make a pact with him. They have been working together since. Not turning to face him, Issei got out one of his butchering knives, responding curtly to the Dragon King's question. "I'm fine. Just thinking." Fafnir frowned from within the gem. While Issei's voice had deepened and matured over the years, as well as being much more succinct, Fafnir could easily tell that something was bothering him. When he talked like this, it was a sensitive topic that was bothering him, usually his parents or Drake. Deciding to test the waters, Fafnir inquired about the two reasons he thought were the reason for his friend's distraught. "Does it involve your parents or a certain dragon?" Issei didn't say anything as he proceeded to gut the deer. "I know that these topics are difficult for you to talk about, Issei, but we need to be open and honest with each other. We're partners." Fafnir immediately stopped himself from saying that word. From the few times that he did it in the past, while Issei didn't explode in anger, he became so reserved and silent that it pained Fafnir to witness it. However, this time Issei did something entirely different. "It's fine, Fafnir," Issei shortly said, stabbing the meat with the skewer. Placing the skewer on the posts, he walked over to Fafnir. "We have been for years. It's just hard to hear sometimes." Fafnir didn't need him to finish, he understood fully what Issei was trying to say. The death of Drake messed up Issei for years. Fafnir knew that sometimes, Issei blamed himself for Drake's fate. One of those times, when Issei thought Fafnir was asleep, Issei made almost alien-like noises in trying to hold back the tears. He mumbled things like "he's gone" or "it's my fault." Fafnir heard it all. It was without a doubt the most severe mental breakdown Issei ever had. While Issei has gotten significantly better at handling emotions since then, Fafnir knew they weren't out of the tunnel yet. "I understand, Issei. Just know that I'm here for you to talk to about Drake or anything else that's bothering you. However, we must clear up one thing." Issei stood over the desk, prepared to listen to the Dragon King's words. "We're partners, Issei. We have each other's backs no matter what. We both didn't trust each other much in the beginning, but we've grown to firmly rely on and support each other. I believe that we can only go forward from here, both in terms of power and friendship, but there's a misconception that we need to remove before we can do so." Issei gripped the back of the chair in anticipation as Fafnir continued. "I think sometimes you see me as him, whether it be unintentional or you truly do see me as him. I'm not Drake, Issei. He's gone, and I could never replace him. He was one of a kind, in terms of power and personality. I know you miss him, but I refuse to act or pretend to be somebody that we both know I'm not." Issei's eyes widened as he heard this. He was shocked that Fafnir knew about that. Despite that, he didn't say anything. He continued to listen. "Not only that, but I've noticed all the times you broke down when you thought I wasn't watching. All the episodes you had when you thought you were all alone. Well, let me tell you, you're not. You have me. I may not be as innately strong as Drake, but that doesn't stop me from reaching new heights. Do you know why? Because I'm Fafnir. The strongest Dragon King, and I refuse to act like my friend just so you can feel better. That's disrespectful not only to me and Drake, but also to yourself." Realizing he was letting his emotions get the better of him, Fafnir collected himself, toning his voice down. "As I said, I know you miss him, Issei. You and I both. But this is not how we should honor his memory. He wouldn't want to see you act like this. We must be better." Issei didn't respond, he just stood there with his eyes closed, absorbing what Fafnir said. During the entire monologue, the Dragon King spoke in a passionate, assertive and somewhat angry tone. Issei knew Fafnir meant every single word that he said. He didn't deny that sometimes he saw Fafnir as Drake, going so far as to talk to the Dragon King like his heavenly counterpart. But the way Fafnir described it, Issei did it far more times than he thought he did. Resonating with Fafnir's words, Issei was ashamed of himself. Ashamed that he made Fafnir feel like his personality wasn't worth as much as Drake's. Issei balled his fists, unable to not compare this to the betrayal his former friends did all those years ago. Just as Fafnir refused to be someone he's not, Issei would do the same. He refused to be like those traitorous people he called his friends in any way. He refused to lower himself to such an atrocious level. He would be better. Opening his eyes, he looked towards the gem, towards Fafnir, and spoke. "You're right, Fafnir, this isn't what Drake would have wanted. I'm sorry that I've treated you this way for so long. You didn't deserve it. I promise you that I won't let it happen again. I won't speak to you like Drake, I'll speak to you like Fafnir." Fafnir couldn't help but smile at Issei's statement. "I know you won't, Issei." Nodding his head, Issei grabbed the gem off the desk and brought it over to the fire pit. Gently placing the gem on one of the stools, Issei tended to the meat that was cooking over the fire. The two dragons sat in comfortable silence as Issei went over to his shelves. Resting on one of them, Issei picked up a wooden cup and turned his attention to a barrel next to him. Taking the lid off, the barrel was revealed to be filled with fresh water Issei collected. Scooping some into his cup, Issei put the lid back on and walked back over to the fire pit to take the meat off. He picked the skewer up rather recklessly, placing his whole hand on the piece of metal. He was lucky that he retained his flame resistance or he would have burned his hand off. Sliding the meat off, Issei placed the skewer aside. Gripping the bone of the meat, he put it towards his mouth and began eating. As he ate, Fafnir spoke. Curious about something. "Issei, I have a question for you." Issei took another bite as he turned his head to Fafnir. The Dragon King took this as his cue to continue. "Do you think that you will ever return to the supernatural?" Grabbing his cup off the floor, Issei took a sip of water. Setting it back on the floor, he responded to his friend's question. "You know the answer to this already, Fafnir. I don't plan to return. Ever. Now you're just being stubborn. If you think about it, Issei, there's practically no reason for any of your allies to want to betray you. I know you think everyone you knew turned their backs on you, but that simply isn't the case. If you have done good things to people, they will only wish and bring good things to you in return, unless they are corrupt and selfish beyond reason. We've seen how the angels and devils are twisted firsthand, but not everyone is like that. Hell, not even all angels and devils. We can narrow this down to just the Mayu, Ceres, Rias, her peerage, and Arena. Surely you can see that." Dodging Fafnir's claim, Issei spoke. "Regardless of who betrayed me, I don't want to return. I have found a new life here. Is it the most eventful? No, but I have found nothing other than peace and tranquility here. I'm not willing to ruin that by returning to the place that nearly broke me." Fafnir retorted, "You do realize at some point, something will force you to return. Whether you're willing or not. Perhaps. But until that day, I'm not going anywhere." Sighing, Fafnir decided to drop the conversation as Issei finished up his dinner. Putting everything away, he spoke to Fafnir. "Let's rest. Our training tomorrow will be no easy feat. We're going to give it everything we have when we do." Agreeing with Issei, Fafnir teleported himself back over to the desk to rest. Issei followed suit, walking over to his bed. Pulling the covers back, Issei climbed into bed, bringing the blanket over him. While Fafnir fell asleep relatively quickly, Issei didn't, finding it difficult to fall asleep these days. Though he was always unsure what the root cause was. Was it something that he was already aware of or was it something Fafnir brought up during dinner tonight? He honestly didn't know. Unable to fall asleep, Issei simply stared at the ceiling as he heard the snow hit his roof. The snow had turned into a full-blown blizzard, but Issei wasn't worried. He had his fair share of blizzard experiences and knew his cabin was sturdy enough to withstand it. Besides that, Issei found the sound of snow falling relaxing. There was something about it that soothed him and made him feel more at peace with himself. After what felt like hours, Issei felt himself getting drowsy. Slowly breathing in and out, Issei closed his eyes, falling asleep. The night went by unnaturally fast as Issei began to wake up. Quickly stretching, Issei pulled off the covers and stood up. "Wake up, Fafnir, we got training too." Issei stopped talking when he turned to the desk, and Fafnir was nowhere to be seen. Thinking that this was some sort of prank, Issei called out the Dragon King. "This isn't funny, Fafnir, come out." Alas, no response came. Issei was about to call for him again until rumble. The ground shook violently, causing Issei to lose his balance and fall face first on the floor. Doing his best to stand up, Issei thought about what could cause this. But he didn't need to. He already had a dreadful feeling about who could have caused this. "It can't be," Issei said. "How did they find me? After all this time?" Using his bed as support, Issei managed to stand up. Looking around, he saw his cabin collapsing. He needed to get out of here, now. As he looked towards the door, however, Issei saw a foreboding crimson light seeping through. Seeing this, Issei couldn't help but think about what was waiting for him on the other side. Was it just Surziches? Or was there an entire army waiting outside his door? He didn't have Fafnir at the moment and couldn't sense his presence. He needed his power to hold off this attack, but he was nowhere to be found. Issei had no choice, there was no time to find him. He would have to deal with this on his own. Looking below him, he thought about opening the floorboards and taking that with him. Without Fafnir, he would need all the power he could get. He thought about it for a short moment, but in the end, decided not to. If he were to lose, they would get their hands on it, and Issei refused to let him keep his only reminder of his deceased dragon friend. Shakily advancing towards the door, Issei struggled to stay upright as the shaking got worse and worse. Once at the door, he put his hand on the handle, but he hesitated. What if he wasn't strong enough to deal with this threat? What if he found himself backed into a corner? What if things ended just like last time? Shaking his head, he knew he couldn't think like that, Drake would be disappointed in him. He wasn't sure where Fafnir was at the moment, but he knew he would be too. Taking a deep breath, Issei opened the door, causing the light to blind him. Covering his eyes, the light continued to consume him as his entire world turned white. When the light started to fade, Issei was able to open his eyes. What he saw shook his very being. No. No, 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 no. He was at a place he never thought he would return to, yet here he was. He couldn't mistake this place for anything else, he knew exactly where he was. The underworld. Although, it was different from the one he knew. The skies were pitch black, the artificial sun wasn't visible at all. Issei could hardly make out anything further than 100 feet around him. Although barely visible, Issei saw clouds had filled the skies, pouring heavy rain down. The wind howled in his ears, even more so than the strongest snowstorms in Hokkaido. The ground wasn't much better. The ground was made of nothing but barren black rock. All forms of vegetation were nowhere to be seen. The only form of plant Issei could see were a few dead trees scattered around him with naked branches on them. Lastly, fires burned in various locations, despite the fact it was raining. Issei didn't know how they were burning, but he was glad they were, considering they were the only sources of light. Essentially, it was a hellish version of hell. Hello Issei. Issei froze when he heard that voice. He didn't even need to turn around to know who it was. Why don't you turn around and face me? Issei's body seemed to move on its own. He tried to keep his body in place, but it refused to listen to him. As his body turned around, he was shocked at what he saw. He saw his iconic crimson hair and foreboding crimson eyes, glowing menacingly. Well, he expected Surziches to be standing there, what didn't expect was everyone else. Not only was Surziches present, but also the other Mayu, Seraphs, Azazel, Riaz, her peerage, Irina, Vali team, Citri's peerage, Sararog's peerage, Riser's peerage, Shinto faction, Hero faction, and every other person Issei considered his ally during his supernatural days. Everyone. Issei mumbled. Oh, don't worry. Surziches eerily stated. The best has yet to arrive. Not saying another word, Surziches turned his head to the sky as if he were expecting something. Unwilling to attempt a surprise attack with all these powerful people present, Issei turned his head to the sky as well. As he did so, he saw two creatures with scale-like wings barreling towards Issei's location. In less than a second, the two beings made contact with the ground, landing behind the enormous group of Issei's former allies. Once the dust cleared up, the creatures he saw shook him up even more. Standing tall behind the group of supernatural beings were Albion, the Vanishing Dragon, and Fafnir, the Golden Dragon King. Both dragons looked down at Issei with pity and disgust as their auras flared around them. Issei stared at the Heavenly Dragon and Dragon King for a moment before finding his voice. Looking towards Fafnir, Issei spoke. Fafnir? What the hell are you doing? Why are you with the enemy? Scoffing, Fafnir curtly responded. Your enemies. They helped me see reason and realize that you're too much of a threat to be kept alive. You're the Chaos Bringer. The end of all life as we know it. Before Issei could retort, a drop of rain got into his eyes. Irritating him, Issei wiped it off with his hand. But to his surprise, it wasn't water at all. Stained on his hand was a smeared red substance. It only took Issei 2 seconds to figure out what it was. Blood. As soon as the realization hit him, blood started to fall from the sky instead of water, drenching Issei in blood. His allies, however, did not, remaining clean and dry. Balls of fire rained from the sky, striking various locations as well as illuminating the surrounding area. Issei didn't know why the rain of blood didn't disturb him, but he remained calm. Disregarding Fafnir's claim, Issei spoke. If that's the case. Issei began. Why bother saying all that shit last night? What was the point of it? He doesn't answer to you. Albion stated abruptly, he has made the right choice joining the winning side, as well as the side of the Heavenly Dragons. While Issei was pissed off about Fafnir's betrayal, he couldn't help but wonder what Albion meant by that. There was only one Heavenly Dragon now, what did he? Before Issei could finish his thoughts, a mighty roar was heard from above. Looking up, he saw another dragon speeding toward the ground. Unlike the first two dragons, Issei felt a feeling of nostalgia looking at the dragon, along with a sense of dread. Violently landing, the third dragon stood between Albion and Fafnir, looking more imposing than both of them combined. This dragon possessed blood-red scales all over his body, with piercing emerald eyes looking down upon Issei. It can't be. Issei was in denial. There was no way this was real. Before him stood the other heavenly dragon, the dragon of domination, the Welsh dragon. Dreg. While elated to see Dreg was alive, Issei lost that feeling as quickly as it came. He stood by his betrayers, his former friends, and his former family. Finding his voice once again, Issei stammered. Dreg. How did you survive? It matters not how I survived, Issei. Dreg said, cutting Issei off. What does matter is that you don't see the end of this day. Everyone present nodded and made voices of agreement with the red dragon. But at this point, Issei didn't care or listen to them. He solely focused on his first partner, who sided with the masses to betray him. Issei heard all this shit from others, but the fact this came from Dreg made something inside Issei snap, causing him to burst into anger. What? Why? Issei exclaimed. You stood by my side when all others betrayed me. You gave me every bit of power at your disposal to hold them back. You sacrificed your life to save me. So why? Why turn your back on me now? Dreg didn't respond. Tell me. Unhearing his bickering, Dreg replied. From the moment I sacrificed myself for you, I had a feeling it was a mistake. That feeling was right. When I was revived, the Mayu and Seraphs told me of your atrocities. You brought nothing but havoc and destruction to heaven, earth, and the underworld. Look around at what you have done. Not even sure why he did so, Issei looked around, seeing piles of corpses lying at his feet. No. This isn't true. There must be a mistake. There are no mistakes, Issei. Dreg stated, you've caused all this. You thought you could get away with it, but now we're here to finish the job. You have nothing. No weapons. No magic. The only that waits for you is death. Unberating his opponent, Dryag released a torrent of crimson flames at Issei. While shaken up, Issei was still aware of his surroundings and tried to move out of the way. But he couldn't. His body remained planted on the ground as the flames came closer and closer. Unable to do anything else, Issei brought his hands up in his pathetic attempt to protect himself. But before the flames could reach him, the ground underneath Issei disappeared, causing Issei to fall into it. Thinking quickly, he tried to grab the side of the hole, but he just couldn't get a good grip. And so Issei fell, further and faster, as the light from the hole above got smaller and smaller. Soon, no more light was visible, but Issei continued to fall further into nothingness. His world was pitch black for what felt like an eternity. Was he in the void? Would he fall forever with no end in sight? His answer came to him soon after. Splash. Issei plunged into the water at such speeds, it disoriented him. Recovering quickly, Issei opened his eyes to view his surroundings, but the water was so thick that he couldn't see anything. Confused, Issei swam up to the surface. Taking a breath, Issei looked around only for it to still be too dark for him to see. Suddenly, a small fire appeared over his head, illuminating a small area around the dragon. Able to view his surroundings a bit, Issei first checked what he was swimming in, making a face of shock. The liquid he was swimming in wasn't water but the same thing that got into his eye. Blood. Issei looked around, he was swimming in an ocean of blood, and every direction he looked in only had more of it. He wasn't sure which way to go until he heard what sounded like a little girl's voice. Come this way. I'll show you the way out. Issei looked in the direction he heard the voice and saw the small flame talking to him. Before he could ask, the flame flew away, in the direction that Issei assumed is the way it wanted him to go. Whoever this was, Issei didn't trust them in the slightest, but he also didn't have a better idea. Maybe this, whatever it was, could lead him to land. Having no other choice, Issei swam in the same direction as the orb. Due to the thickness of the blood, he found it more difficult to move quicker than he would have liked. Nonetheless, he kept swimming, not letting the flame out of sight. Aside from his breathing and blood splashing, there wasn't any other sound present. Boom. In an instant, the sky lit up, revealing to be red just like the ocean. Issei also heard what he thought to be voices of people screaming and yelling coming from all around him. Looking down, Issei saw what looked like souls swimming through the ocean of blood. Some swam past him, others gripped onto his arms and legs, trying to drown him. Yanking them off, Issei continued to swim forward with more resistance from souls, hearing them scream in agony. But as he listened more closely, Issei soon recognized the voices he was hearing. It was the voices of his former allies and friends, throwing insults and blaming him for something. All the while he heard piercing screams in the background. Traitor. We should have never trusted you. You did this to us. Heaven will never forgive you for your atrocious deeds. How much more will you destroy? I hope you rot. You took our families, our friends, our homes. How much more will you take? My sister is dead because of you. You deserve nothing but the most brutal death imaginable. The underworld lays in ruins because of you. You took our lives from us. I hope you suffer for all eternity in the deepest depths of hell. You're nothing but a monster. How could you? We've lost everything because of you." Issei continued to hear them say demeaning things about him, almost letting it get to him. Shaking his head, he knew these things were taunting him. They were all just trying to get under his skin. Toning them out, he followed the flame for what felt like a century until finally, he saw a rocky shore. Desperately swimming to it, Issei crawled onto the shore, shaken even more than before. He wasn't sure how much more he could take. Looking up, Issei saw the flame before him and spoke to him again. "You're nearly there. Just a little more." Again, before Issei could ask anything, the flame moved further inland, moving so fast that Issei almost couldn't see it anymore. Not wanting to lose it, Issei gathered what little strength he had left, pushing himself up to his feet, and ran in the direction the flame went. He ran faster and faster, but the flame continued to escape him. Eventually, Issei could no longer see the flame, but that didn't stop him. He continued to run harder and faster in hopes of catching up to his only hope out of this place. He ran for what felt like hours upon hours, but he still had yet to find the flame. Issei was about to cut his losses when he saw a very faint light in the distance. Inspired, Issei felt invigorated as he felt adrenaline fill his veins. He ran at full speed towards the light, which continued to get bigger and bigger. At long last, Issei finally reached the flame. Taking quick breaths in and out, Issei turned to face the flame, who began to cackle wildly. "Congratulations. You've arrived at your place of death." The girl sounded nothing as she did before. Her voice deepened and had a creepy tone to it as she talked. "What? What the hell do you mean by that? I thought you were leading me to the way out." The girl, if you could even call her that anymore, laughed at the dragon's statement. "Oh, I just told you I would show you the way out, never told you how." Issei gritted his teeth, berating himself for making such an idiotic mistake. "But don't worry. I'm not going to kill you. The person who will is someone you know all too well." While laughing, the flame fizzled out, becoming nothing more than a couple of embers on the ground. Issei's eyes widened when heard that voice. It was a voice he hadn't heard in so long and yearned to hear. Surely he was hearing things. There was no way that was her. "Issei, please turn around and look at me." Slowly turning around, Issei's eyes widened more when he saw what he wanted to see. Standing a few feet in front of him was a middle-aged woman with dark brown hair tied into a ponytail. She didn't share many similarities with Issei except for her eyes. Her eyes were the same beautiful shade of gold as Issei's, confirming to him she was her. Standing in front of Issei was his mother, Miki Haidu. "Mom?" Issei whispered, walking slowly to her. "My son?" Miki responded, opening her arms which Issei eagerly accepted, wrapping his own around her. Issei had grown to be significantly taller than Miki, leading him to gently rest his head on hers, while Miki rested her head on his chest. Both stayed in silence, enjoying the embrace they found themselves in. Issei wrapped his arms tightly around his mom, he missed her so much. How couldn't he? He knew she, of all people, would stay by his side and believe what he claimed to be true. Lost in bliss, Issei almost didn't notice his mother tugging his shirt. Looking down at her, Issei spoke. "What's wrong, Mom?" Miki didn't say anything, she just continued to tug his shirt, her head buried deep in her son's chest. Now slightly worried, Issei bent down so he was more on the same level as his mom. "Mom?" Issei said, holding her shoulders. "What's bothering you?" Miki didn't say anything. Instead, she pulled on his shoulders while standing on her tiptoes. Assuming she wanted to whisper it into his ear, Issei bent down, even more, turning his head slightly sideways so Miki could say what was bothering her. Both of them stayed like that for a couple of moments until Miki spoke softly into Issei's ear. "Will you die for me?" Issei's heart dropped when he heard that. Abruptly, he pushed her back while backing away himself. Did he hear that correctly? Perhaps he misheard. Anxious, Issei asked her to repeat what she said. "What? What did you just say?" Yeah, he had to have misheard. Surely his mother wouldn't wish for her own son's death, right? "I said," Miki eerily stated, slowly lifting her head. "Will you die for me?" Issei's heart completely shattered as he heard this. Not only did Fafnir betray him now, but also Drake and his own mother. Issei felt completely hopeless. He wanted nothing more than to die right here and now. Unbeknownst to him, his wish was about to be granted. Looking into his mother, Issei saw golden eyes were no longer there. In its place, two black orbs filled Miki's sockets. Her body seemed to twitch uncontrollably as she took a step closer to Issei. Issei, however, didn't react at all, blankly staring forward. "Come on, Issei. Answer me." She took another step. "Will you?" Another step. "Die." And another. 4. Nikki took her last step as blood started to leak from her eyes. Mia. As soon as those words left her mouth, Mickey transformed instantaneously, becoming what Issei could only describe as the devil. The devil let out a violent shriek into the sky as fires and explosions raged all around them. The devil lunged itself toward Issei, its claw ready to decapitate him. Issei couldn't move, he knew this would be the end of him. He was so frustrated with no one but himself. With nothing left to lose, Issei roared in unison with the devil, not in fear, but rather in anger and rage. Bruer. Brian. Issei howled in fury as the devil came closer and closer, abruptly throwing its claw forward too. Bruer. Issei's voice boomed across his cabin as he shot up in his bed. Issei frantically looked around and realized he was still in his cabin. He also noticed how the purple gem was resting on his desk. Calming down, Issei realized what he just experienced. A dream. Fafnir, who woke up about half an hour ago, was surprised when he heard the sudden noise coming from Issei. Worried for his partner, he voiced his concern. Issei. Are you alright? What happened? After calming down, Issei threw the sheets off and sat on the side of his bed. Looking towards the Dragon King, Issei replied. Nothing, it was just a dream. More like a nightmare. Fafnir retorted. Tell me, what happened Issei? Issei was about to brush Fafnir's concern to the side again when he remembered the discussion they had last night. He recalled how Fafnir told him he would be there for him and support him no matter what came his way. Looking at the Dragon King, Issei couldn't help but recall what happened in his dream. About how Fafnir joined his former comrades. Shaking his head, he knew all that he witnessed was just his imagination and that Fafnir wouldn't even dream of turning his back on him. With that in mind, Issei began to explain what he dreamt of. It was a dream. A dream about the devils finding me and you joining their side. I also saw Drake and my mother. Fafnir simply sat in silence, absorbing the information his partner gave. Interesting. Would you mind going into more detail? Nodding his head, Issei went into depth about what exactly happened during his dream, with Fafnir keenly listening in on every detail. After wrapping up his nightmare, Issei waited for Fafnir's response. Which came rather quickly. That was something. I'm sure that couldn't have been pleasant for you. I'm sorry that you had to experience that. It's fine. Issei answered. It was only a dream, nothing more. Still, I find it bizarre that you saw Drake not only revived, but on the side of the enemy. He would never do that to you. Yeah. Issei distantly said. Seeing that Issei was still shaken up from his nightmare, Fafnir gave him his support. Issei, I know this was hard for you to open up about, and I'm glad you decided to share it with me. You didn't have to, but you choose to do so because you trust me and I will respect that trust. I promise not to betray you. Even if all of the supernatural comes for us, I will stand by your side until the very end. I know I've only had 2 wielders including you, but you've been my favorite thus far, and I hope you'll continue to have me as not only a partner, but as a friend. Issei stood there with his head tilted downwards, not making so much as a peep to Fafnir. However, when Issei finally came to and raised his head, the Dragon King was flabbergasted. There stood Issei, with a small yet visible smile on his face. Before he could comment on it, Issei replied to his friend. Thank you Fafnir. Issei said. That means a lot to me. My promise to you is the same. I'll have your back no matter what, and we'll never part ways with each other. We'll fight, side by side. Unable to not smile back, the Dragon King responded. It's no problem Issei. Fafnir affirmed. Now, let's not waste any more time and get started with our training. In agreement, Issei grabbed the gem off the desk and began walking towards the door. Yes. Issei replied. Let's. Line break. Silence. All she could hear was silence. The lone woman sat on a bed in a dark room. The only source of light was the sun, seeping through the curtain-covered window. Even with the poor lighting, anyone could tell by looking at the woman that she was a sight to behold. Golden hair flowed down her back, emerald eyes, and a face that was a tad on the cute side. By almost any standard, she was beautiful. Well, at least that's what people saw when she was out in public. In private, she dropped her facade, keeping a steady frown present on her face. Her one silky golden hair was ruffled and out of place. Her eyes lost all the life they once had, not shining with even a fraction of their former selves. To put it simply, she was a mess. She wasn't sure others have noticed, but one thing was for sure, she was broken beyond repair. She had remained sitting on her bed for hours, staring at a photo in her hands. A picture of her in high school with a boy standing next to her with his arm wrapped around her shoulders. Staring at his bright smile, the woman raised her finger, bringing it up to the photo, and traced the boy's face. Why? The woman said to herself. Why couldn't I say anything back then? The woman's hand started shaking, fighting back the tears threatening to fall from her face. If If I had said something, I could have stayed by your side. But I didn't. Fafnir was right, I wasn't still a coward. The woman, Asia Argento, sat completely still on the bed reminiscing about that day. It had been 30 years of nothing but regret and misery for Asia. From the first moment she was told about the plan to kill Issei, all she felt was disdain and disgust for everyone around her. Kiba, Zenobia, Kaneko, Akeno, her, and everyone else. Had they forgotten what Issei has done for them? What he risked for them? What he sacrificed for them? Not just when fighting Rizavam, Issei sacrificed himself every single day of his life for them, always putting their needs before his. When someone had a bad day, Issei would do everything he could to cheer them up. When someone needed help, Issei was already on it, helping in any way he can. He may not know what he was doing or what he needed to do, but he showed initiative, figuring it out as he went. Unwillingly, Asia could recall every single event from that day, and the days after that had led her to this point, serving to punish and torment her in her dreams. When the idea of betraying him was brought to her attention, Asia felt something she rarely ever felt. Rage. She was infuriated. How could she not be? Blasted by a wave of anger, shock, and disbelief, Asia was sure she was hearing things. How could she even fathom the thought of betraying her own brother? The person who helped her find her way to the church. The person who accepted her and became her first friend. The person who gave her a new life and a home to return to. The person who gave her a loving family that supported and spoiled her. Asia couldn't ask for anything more. She was incredibly grateful for all Issei had done and wished to pay back that debt by being there for him. Asia wanted to shout, Asia wanted to scream. She'd never felt so enraged in her entire life. She wanted to let out all her anger and frustration upon the people she thought were her family. She wanted to tell them that they were out of their mind if they think she was going to agree with this plan. Only nothing was said. Her mouth remained sealed shut, not uttering a single noise. Fearing what would become of her if she dared speak out against her peerage and the leaders, she chose silence. Even when the love of her life was in danger, she still couldn't muster the courage to speak out against her peers. It was pathetic. Throughout the entire meeting, Asia's heart screamed at her to say something, anything at all. Even still, her brain couldn't form a single sentence. She just stood there with a smile on her face and nodded when someone asked her a question. After the meeting was over, Asia rushed to a secluded area to breathe and calm herself down. They were going to attack Issei and she didn't anything about it. She never felt so frustrated and helpless in her entire life. She tried to rationalize that this needed to happen because if they didn't, the underworld and Earth could be in severe danger. But it was an unjust justification and deep down, Asia knew this. When the day finally came to enact a plan to get rid of Issei, Asia thought she had mentally prepared herself. She thought she had come to terms with the situation and knew this is how it had to be. However, once they encountered Issei in the streets of Lilith and she saw his contorted face, that was it. The dam that held her emotions back gave way and her feelings poured out. Tears streamed down Asia's face. She wasn't ready for this at all. Of course, she wasn't. She could never bring herself to betray Issei of her own volition. Everyone around her was so focused on Issei that they didn't know or care that Asia was crying. She was so wrapped up in her sorrow that she didn't realize that the chase had already begun. Despite the veil hiding her emotions being removed, Asia still didn't do anything. She stayed quiet, all the while Issei was pummeled by magic, fighting for his life. Even when confronted by Fafnir, Asia put up a front, trying to show him that she didn't care about Issei at all. However, the dragon saw right through her and her lies. Although Asia was conscious for most of the fight, she knew once everyone else was defeated, there would only be her, Gaspar, and Riaz remaining. Issei would most likely not even bother saying a word to her, he'd just get out of the picture. Asia had assumed correctly. After maiming Akeno and Irina, Issei shot forward to the two bishops, making a beeline toward them. Asia barely had time to register that he was in front of them before she felt metallic claws wrapped around her head. When Issei slammed both her and Gaspar's heads together, that was it. The lights were out for Asia. When Asia came to, she saw Gabriel sitting next to her, healing Asia with her magic. Asia also saw Gaspar and Kaneko was awake as well, although the Nekomata was certainly on the cusp of passing out again. Gabriel didn't utter a word to Asia. She didn't ask how she was doing or if anything hurt, she simply stood up and walked over to four who were severely injured and sat next to them to tend to their wounds, with Riaz sitting on the opposite side of the Seraph. The part of Asia was glad that Gabriel reacted that way. Asia forced herself to sit up and looked around her, taking in the results of the battle. Despite all the setbacks, Issei put up a valiant effort. He was able to severely injure Kiba, Zenvoya, Roswis, Akeno, and Irina. He was able to put Kaneko, Gaspar, and herself out of commission. He was even able to hold back the combined forces of the Mayu and Ceres for a time all by himself. Issei played every card he had and did everything he possibly could. But it wasn't enough. The fight was over and Issei had lost. She sat a little distance away while the Mayu and Michiel surrounded the dragon. Asia watched as Surziches beat Issei into a pulp and proceed to slash his right eye. Asia darted her eyes away when she heard Issei's scream. When Asia turned her head back, she saw Surziches and Michiel picking Issei up while Ajuka stood in front of the defeated dragon. Were they going to beat him even more? It was almost too much for Asia to bear. Just how much could she take of this? How much more would it take to make her do something about it? No more. Asia spoke to herself, she has had enough. She steeled herself, finding the courage to ask the Mayu if Issei could be spared. If she could somehow convince them, Issei would be detained, giving Asia time to figure out what to do next. She had finally made up her mind. It might have been at the last second, but Asia pushed herself up, finding it difficult to find her balance. Once she recovered her footing, Asia took a step forward, doing what she should have done from the start. Help Issei. And maybe, just maybe, Issei would find it in his heart to forgive her in time. Unfortunately, Asia's window of opportunity was sealed shut. Asia watched in horror as she saw Ajuka tear Issei's pawn pieces out of his body, giving them back to Riaz, and as if that wasn't enough, Surziches threw Issei's almost lifeless body into the ravine. Asia's eyes widened, her walking, breathing, and entire world came to a halt. She couldn't even begin to process what just happened. Issei was just thrown off a cliff. By Surziches. With not a shred of remorse or mercy, just agitation and annoyance. Her heart felt like it was about to explode as the pressure built inside her. It took everything Asia had to not cry and scream right then and there. She couldn't let herself be the victim of the questions that were sure to follow if she did. Her face, however, must have shown some form of discomfort as the rest of the peerage who were awake looked at her with puzzled looks, as if they were completely oblivious as to what they just did. Something finally snapped inside Asia when saw this, and she realized something that she should have seen from the moment she first stepped into the occult research club. These people weren't her friends. And they sure as hell weren't her family. All they were power-hungry, manipulative, deceitful snakes. Ready to turn their backs on someone the moment that person stops being beneficial to them. They extort and use them for all they're worth, leaving them broken and alone once they had their fun. Who calls a group like that their friends? Who calls people like that their family? The torrent of emotions flooded and swirled around in Asia's mind. She could barely think straight as someone lightly grabbed her on the shoulder. Asia swerved her head around to face the person. Her eyes lit up with fury and rage as she saw who it was. Riaz? Are you alright, Asia? Riaz asked. You look like you're ready to kill someone. Oh, Asia wanted nothing more than just that. She wanted to put her hands around her king's throat and suffocate her. Alas, she couldn't do it. She didn't have enough strength to do it, and even if she did, she would have to fight off the rest of her peerage on top of the Mayu and Seraphs. If Issei couldn't defeat them, what chance did she have? So, Asia did the only thing she could do. She forced a smile on her face and made up an excuse. Yes, I'm fine. I'm just angry at all the time we wasted on Issei, we should have gotten rid of him sooner. Asia immediately wanted to throw up after saying that. She didn't believe that at all, however, she needed to say something believable. Knowing that the people she was talking to were true devils, Asia was certain that they wouldn't ask her any questions. Okay, I just wanted to be sure. Riaz replied with a soft smile. You were all over the place during this entire battle, so I wanted to make sure you were okay. A king must look after their servants after all. While Asia kept her facade up, on the inside she was fuming. The irony of Riaz's statement was unparalleled. From where Asia was standing, a king only looks after their servant if they have value, substantial value at that. If they don't, they're nothing more than the trash on the side of the street. It made Asia sick to her stomach. Before the healer could dwell any longer on her thoughts, she saw Seraphol talking to someone through a magic circle. Asia couldn't hear what the person on the other end was saying, but did see Seraphol have a look of shock on her face. After the transmission was cut, Seraphol shared what she was told with the rest of the leaders. Then the Mayu and Michiel turned around with a look of urgency on their face. Taking the initiative, Riaz walked forward to ask her brother what was going on, while the rest of the peerage waited to hear what Surziches had to say. Brother, what's going on? Who was Seraphol talking and why do you all look so worried? Surziches looked towards his sister, her peerage, and back at Riaz. Sighing, he responded to his sister with a solemn voice. Azazel. Azazel is coming. I'm not sure where he picked up the idea or how he knew we were even here, but he's on his way. Riaz, Gasper, and Kaneko's eyes widened, and Gabriel perked her ears as she heard this. Azazel was coming here. If Azazel found out what they'd done, he would no doubt fight them himself or even worse, declare war on angels and devils. What? Azazel is coming here. Gasper whimpered, his legs shaking at the very thought of invoking the fallen angel's wrath. Yes. Surziches repeated. He's coming here. What are we going to do? We are in no condition to fight, and he'll no doubt ask what happened here. Riaz tried her best to keep herself as calm as possible. Panicking wasn't going to help anything. I'm fully aware. Serzic answered. He's too perceptive for his own good. Anything short of an immaculate excuse isn't going to stave off his suspicions. Mitchell stepped forward to add to the conversation. Not to mention that Azazel has always seen Asay like a son. If he were to find out he died by our hands, I have no doubt he'd hurl a light spear into our faces and surely declare war on the angels and devils after that. Then what can we do? Kaneko asked, speaking up for the first time. What could we possibly say to not arouse suspicion from Azazel? Everyone muttered thoughts of agreement, wondering what they could do. Every minute they wasted, the closer Azazel was getting. They needed some sort of lie. I have an idea. Everyone turned to look at the person talking, Riaz. Once she had everyone's attention, she laid out her plan. We could make ourselves look like the victim of Asay's assault. We'll sit on the ground tired and beaten as Azazel approaches us, which shouldn't be hard to do given our condition. Riaz looked around at the state of everyone, most of them were bruised and bleeding in several different places. The rest of her peerage and arena were brutalized and maimed. The only people who had minimal injuries were the Mayu and Seraphs, which made sense. After quickly checking everyone, Riaz continued her explanation. I highly doubt Azazel will attack from the get-go, regardless of whether he suspects we killed Asay or not. Even so, to be on the safe side, we should do what I aforementioned. Once he lands, the Mayu and Seraphs could explain how Asay had gone rogue and suddenly attacked us without warning. Then before Azazel can start asking any questions, you could teleport us back to the Gremory estate to be treated for our wounds. There won't be any account from Asay. There's nothing else here to suggest that we were the ones to attack him. Azazel will have no choice but to agree with us, or at the very least, he won't ask any more questions. After Riaz finished elaborating her plan, she looked toward her peerage and the leaders to hear their thoughts. Yes, I think that just might work. Ajuka replied, stroking his chin. He continued. It's the best shot we have, there's no time to think of anything more detailed. Does anyone have any objections? Ajuka looked around at everyone, but no one said a word. Alright then, let us begin. That was the last thing that Asia can vividly remember from that day. Everything else rushed past her like a blur. She can vaguely recall seeing Azazel in the sky and landing in front of them. However, once Azazel started walking towards the group, Asia's body shut down, going completely limp as she hit the ground below her. She knew that her injuries weren't completely healed and were only superficially taken care of. Despite that, she thought it was enough to keep her awake for a while. How wrong she was. Gabriel most likely only did the bare minimum to wake Asia up and stopped right after that. Once again, Asia felt happy in a strange way that Gabriel did this. Nevertheless, it was strange. Why would the Seraph do that? Questions aroused in Asia as consciousness fled her mind. Did Gabriel not agree with Mitchell and Mayu on this plan? Was she forced into doing this by Mitchell? Was Gabriel regretting her decisions just like her? These were the questions that plagued Asia's mind as the last of her consciousness faded away, leaving her mind in a dark place. Was it finally happening? She could feel something rising within her. Flickers of her consciousness sparked in her mind as she tried her hardest to wake up. She felt more and more of her mind come back to her with each passing moment. At last, consciousness was returning to her. With her mind waking up, she worked on opening her eyes. Unfortunately, she was unsuccessful, her eyes felt so heavy. She can't remember the last time her eyes felt so heavy. Over and over again she tried, with each attempt being as unsuccessful as the attempt before. Wanting to wake up now more than ever, with everything she had, she used all her strength to open her eyes. After what felt like an eternity, her eyes split apart. A white light seeped through the small crack as she forced her eyes to open more and more. The light rushed in even more as the crack between her eyelids grew bigger and bigger. This gave her motivation to keep going. She was so close. She could feel it. With one final push, she opened her eyes fully as the light enveloped her entire vision. She had done it. She was returning to the world of the living. Ugh. But the sluggish groan, Asia's eyes fluttered open. Immediately squinting when the harsh sunlight entered her eyes, closed them reflexively. Opening her eyes again, this time prepared for the amount of light that was present, Asia lifted her head slightly and tried to prop her elbows so she could use them to lift herself. As soon as she tried to move, however, a sharp pain traveled throughout the healer's entire body. It was as if lightning coursed through her body, zapping and burning everything it touched. The pain was unreal to Asia. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out as she yelled an inaudible scream. Slowly, Asia reeled her head back, softly putting her head back on the pillow she was resting on. She didn't have any energy to talk nor any to think, all she could do was lay there in silence. The pain was nothing as she recalled from when she passed out, this was much worse. Afraid of causing the pain to surge again, Asia lay down motionless, staring at the ceiling of the room she was in. She wasn't sure how long she lay there, however, she knew it must have been hours as the sun started to change colors. What was once a vibrant white slowly turned into a mellow orange, casting a shadow on everything it touched. Deciding to try again, Asia propped her elbows. This time she was much slower and meticulous about it. The pain was still present, yet it wasn't nearly as bad as it was before. Slowly but surely, Asia used her elbows to push her entire body to sit up. After she straightened herself out, Asia pushed the covers off of herself, dragging her lifeless legs across the bed and onto the floor. Both feet caused a slight jolt of pain as she planted them on the floor, quickly settling down after that. Now that she was finally out of bed, Asia looked around to see where she was. The decorative walls, the expensive pieces of art, and the huge bed all led to one conclusion. She was in her room at the Gremory estate. Scanning the room, it seemed that nothing had changed. Everything seemed to be exactly how she left it. However, once her eyes met her desk, her heart dropped. For the first time since she awakened, Asia croaked out her first words. "WH. Where is my diary?" The diary that housed her feelings for Issei and all the memories she made with him was gone. Asia knew for a fact that she left it laying there on the table before the last time she left her room. It was one of her greatest treasures. It wasn't just that either. Asia looked across the room again, this time with much more carefully, and realized a lot of personal belongings were gone as well. Someone must have come in and thrown all stuff she had that had to do with Issei out. Issei. The sudden thought of the love of her life released all the memories that were temporarily suppressed within Asia's mind. How she didn't voice her disagreement with getting rid of Issei during the meeting. How she left Issei to face the threat of angels and devils alone. How she saw Issei getting beaten by Surziches. How she watched Issei get thrown off a cliff by the very same person who she thought of as her family and left to die. All while she stayed back and did nothing. The crying had already begun. Asia brought her knees up to her chest and hung her head down in shame. Tears and snot ran down her face as the crying continued. A sudden thought ran through Asia's mind while she wept. Wait. WH. What about that? Almost instinctively, Asia jumped out of bed and got on her knees to look under her bed. The pain that shot through her body was immense, but she didn't care. She just had to know. Please still be here. Please still be here. Asia's voice slowly came back to her as frantically looked under her bed, desperate to find what she was looking for. After moving the last object, Asia slowly looked toward where she normally kept it. Her eyes widened when got her answer. There it was. A small square piece of paper was placed face down, nestled gently against everything else. Asia reached forward to hold it all the while her arm shook incessantly. Lightly, pinching the corner of the paper with her fingers, she brought her arm back, bringing the paper with it. Rotating the paper around, Asia went from crying tears of sorrow to tears of joy. The piece of paper was a picture of her and Issei the day they graduated from Kuo Academy High School. Issei had his arm wrapped around her with a smile brighter than the sun on his face. When Asia saw this, she let out a sigh through her tears. Thank God. Asia knelt and held the photo on her chest. Her head throbbed violently from speaking of God, but she couldn't care less about that right now. She was relieved to find the thing she treasured the most. The tears of joy went back to being ones of sorrow after the glow effect wore off. Asia cried even harder than before, holding the photo tightly to her chest. Issei. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Asia apologized over and over again, but knowing that it wouldn't make the situation any better made her feel even worse. But couldn't stop saying it. She repeated herself hundreds of times, only stopping when her throat became too sore for her to speak. Asia knelt there in silence with only the sound of tears accompanying her. Asia didn't know how long stayed like that, but quite frankly, she didn't care. She just wanted to be close to Issei, even if that meant doing so through a photo. It was well into the night when Asia opened her eyes again, the picture still held tightly to her chest. Looking down at it, she once again was thankful that it was still in her possession. Asia had kept it separate from everything else due to how special the picture was to her. She was so lucky that she did, otherwise, she would have lost it too. The tears had died down substantially from when Asia started. She had run out of any energy to give. Even the energy to cry. All Asia was left with was drowsiness and fatigue. She debated on whether or not she should hold the photo while she slept. While Asia wanted to, she couldn't risk someone walking in and seeing that photo in her hands. It would bring with it unnecessary questions that Asia wouldn't be able to lie about. Not to mention that it would undoubtedly lead to the photo being thrown away, and Asia refused to let that happen. So, begrudgingly, Asia set the photo back where she originally found it and moved everything that she had displaced back as well. Once she finished hiding the picture, Asia slowly stood up and crawled into bed. The pain in her body still made it difficult for the healer to move, but Asia was getting better at dealing with it each time. Pulling the covers up, Asia found herself staring at the ceiling of her room once again. She continued to do so as a lone tear streamed down her face. "Issei." Asia whimpered. "I'm sorry." Asia apologized one more time as all the energy she had left fled from her body, leaving Asia to drift into a deep sleep. Asia once again woke up to the sight of the ceiling and harsh sunlight. However, this time, she heard something different. She heard the sounds of tearing cloth and the ringing of water right next to her. Turning her head to see who it was, Asia saw a woman in a black and white dress with a red ribbon tied around her neck. A ruffled white headdress sat on top of her face with knots of strings resting on either side of her head. She had short black hair and baby blue eyes that were looking down towards Asia's arm, removing the dirty bandage from her body. From what she wore and what she was doing, Asia assumed that she was a maid. The maid crumpled up the old bandage, putting it down next to the other dirty ones. As she turned back around, she saw Asia awake, looking right at her. "Oh, you're finally awake," the maid said. "I wasn't sure how much longer you would be out." After she finished her sentence, Asia asked the first question that came to her mind. "Who are you?" "My name is Arya," the maid replied. "I'm here by the orders of my master, Serzich's Lucifer, to tend to your wounds." The mention of the Crimson Satan was enough to make Asia grit her teeth. She despised the man she once called family. Not to the same level as Ria's, but pretty damn close. Seeing the expression on her face, Arya voiced her concern. "Are you alright, Asia?" Arya asked. "Was I too rough?" Asia, completely forgetting she was in the presence of someone else, cursed herself mentally. Luckily Arya had asked the perfect question for her to make up an excuse. With that in mind, Asia answered. "Yeah, could you be a little more gentle?" "Sorry. I know that you're just trying to do your job." "It's no problem. Really. I'll be more careful. Thank you for letting me know." Arya gave a quick smile before turning her attention back to Asia's arm, making sure she moved and positioned it as tenderly as he could. While Asia watched Arya bandage her wounds, she thought about what she first said when she woke up. Arya said she wasn't sure how much longer she'd be out. What did she mean by that? It hasn't been that long, right? Just a few days at most are what it felt like to Asia. But from the way Arya was describing it, she was out for way longer. Initially hesitant to ask, Asia called out to her caretaker, causing her to stop working and look at Asia. "When I first woke up you told me that you weren't sure how much longer I would be out. How long have I been?" "No more than a few days, right?" Arya shook her head from side to side before responding to the question. "No, you've been out for a little over a month. A month and 4 days to be exact." "A month?" Asia was out for an entire month. "A few days." She could see that being the case. "A week?" Believable. "A couple of weeks?" Somewhat understandable. But a whole month? Asia was shocked. She didn't think her injuries were that serious. Reading her patient like a book, Arya told Asia exactly what she wanted to hear. "You're surprised. As a healer, you must know how badly you were injured. The concussion you got from colliding with Gasper was pretty severe. Not sure if you wanted my professional opinion, but realistically you shouldn't have woken up yet. I'd say you would have come to maybe a couple of weeks from now, but it would seem you've woken up early." Arya paused, waiting to see if Asia would say anything, but no words came out of her mouth. After a few more moments with no response, she wrapped up her thoughts as she finished bandaging Asia. As for Gasper, he has already awakened and is working on rehabilitating himself. My best guess is that the vampire blood within him accelerated his healing process, so he was able to wake up faster than the rest of you. The thought of Gasper sparked yet another question for Asia. She didn't care about them, not in the slightest. Nevertheless, she was curious. How were they doing? "I see. What about the others?" "I can't say anything about your peerage's condition with complete certainty," Arya explained. "As I was only assigned to you. The rest of your peerage and the angel was given different maids to tend to them. However, I can tell what I know, if that interests you." Wanting any amount of insight into their conditions, Asia nodded slightly. Seeing this, Arya began to inform the bishop what she knew. "After your battle with the Red Dragon Emperor, you passed out and Gasper and Kaneko followed suit as well. I've heard rumors that the Mayu and Ceres talked with the leader of the fallen angels, but I'm not sure if that's true nor do I know what they talked about." Asia nodded. She knew this part of the story. She wanted to hear what happened since she was asleep. "As I said, Gasper has already woken up and has been the longest out of everyone. Kaneko woke up shortly after him. Both seem to be relatively okay. Both are having a hard time finding their balance while walking and easily get disoriented, but that will get better over time. So overall, they're doing fine. I cannot say the same for the rest of your friends, however. Everyone else was egregiously injured. It took an entire team to perform surgery and stabilize them. And now we have a maid with each of them at all times to track their condition and make sure they can respond if something does go wrong. As for the injuries themselves, I don't even know where to begin. Where do I even start?" Arya thought about how she wanted to word this. After a few seconds of thinking, she began talking once again. Both Kiba and Zenobia are in a rough position. Zenobia had a whole collection of arteries and veins burst within her, causing massive internal bleeding. Not to mention the extreme amount of blunt trauma that was applied to her. The force was so much that many of her bones fractured and the bones surrounding the point of impact were completely broken. She also suffered a concussion, like you, but her injuries were much more severe. I doubt she'll wake up until next month at the very earliest. However, Kiba got the worse of the two regarding the long term. While in the short term, Zenobia looks worse for wear, she eventually heal in due time. Kiba, however, may not. He was slashed in such a way that Excalibur cut deeply into his shoulders, chest, and back, tearing the majority of his muscles. He was stabbed through the stomach as well. Even if Kiba recovers with minimal scarring, I'm unsure if he'll ever be able to lift a sword higher than his chest ever again. As for Roswis, her injuries might be just as bad, maybe a little worse. She had lacerations starting at her right shoulder and going down toward the left side of her waist. The lacerations weren't surface level either, they went deep. Some went so far that they pierced her lungs and caused blood to rush in. She had been having a difficult time breathing since, but she had slowly been recovering. Out of everyone besides you, Gasper, and Kaneko, she got off the easiest. Arya closed her eyes and took a deep breath, preparing herself for the final two that were left. Then there's Akeno and Irina. They have, without a doubt, suffered the greatest injuries. Akeno lost her fallen angel wing, it has been completely ripped out from her body, there was no saving it. As you're probably aware, once you lose a wing, it's gone forever. Akeno won't be able to fly for a long time, and they will more than likely be visible scars from where the wing was ripped out. Lastly, Irina is in the same boat as Akeno, only much worse. Every single one of her wings was ripped out. If she didn't have the halo over her head, you wouldn't be able to tell she was an angel. Both of them are still hooked up to our machinery, and I'm honestly unsure of when they will open their eyes. That sums up everyone, do you have any other questions? Asia lay still as she took in all this information. While she watched Issei pummel them all into submission, she didn't know the true extent of their injuries. Issei did quite a number on them. He might have lost the battle, but he did as much damage before he eventually went down. Asia, in a strange way, was proud of him. However, thinking about Issei again made Asia want to cry. She had been holding it back this entire time, but she knew she couldn't last much longer. Knowing what she was about to do, she tried to finish this conversation with Arya so she could have some time alone. No, I don't. Thank you for taking the time to explain the situation to me. I appreciate it. I'm getting tired again, I would like to rest if that's okay with you. Asia hoped that she didn't project a sad tone or anything that would say otherwise. I understand, you still haven't fully recovered, take all the time you need. Once you're well enough, I will bring you to my master and Ria's. They will give you the details I don't have. The mention of Surzich's alongside Ria's once again left an awful taste in Asia's mouth. However, she didn't show it on her face and ended the conversation. Okay, thanks again. I will talk to you later. Asia said as she shut her eyes. Getting up from the chair she was sitting in, Arya made her way to the door. After softly closing the door, she walked down the hall, her footsteps becoming softer and softer until they faded away completely. Asia couldn't hold back the tears anymore. Another episode of crying had begun. She can't remember the last time she cried so much. But then again, she can't remember where she lost someone she knew, especially someone dear to her heart. Once again, Asia curled into a ball, bringing her knees to chests, crying into them. Why? Why did it have to be you, Issei? Why did you have to die? It should have been me. I'm the one who should have died. Asia wrapped her arms around herself, grasping onto her shoulders. She gripped so hard that her nails pierced her skin, causing blood to trickle down her arm. The pain barely even registered in Asia's mind. All she could think about was how she turned her back on Issei. If even Irina wasn't going to take Issei's side, then Asia at the very least should have, but she didn't. She remained a coward until the very end. Wallowing in her cowardice, Asia crashed down onto her bed and cried herself to sleep. Yet again, Asia was greeted by the ceiling of her room and the sunlight invading her eyes. She swore that these last few days have been like clockwork. Her eyes were pink and irritated from spending the last few days crying almost non-stop. Her vision also was a little blurry when she opened her eyes as well. Most definitely a side effect of the constant crying. Throwing the covers off of herself, Asia pushed herself out of bed, and to her surprise, she was able to stand up on her own. Making her way to the balcony on the other side of the room, Asia slowly put one foot in front of the other, trying to find her balance. After almost falling over twice, Asia was able to walk with little to no difficulty. Reaching the double doors that led to the balcony, Asia turned the knobs and pushed the doors open. A strong gust of wind blew against her as she stepped outside for the first time in over a month. Asia looked around, taking in the view of the gardens of the Gremory estate. Past that, she could see rolling hills, forests, and mountains that lay beyond. All the while the sun started to set behind the mountains. It was a beautiful view. If only she knew what lay within the walls of the estate, she would never step foot in here. It was because of the devils that resided in these walls that she lost the only person she ever loved. All because they thought he no longer had value as the Red Dragon Emperor. Every single time Asia thought about it, it only made her angry and upset. But it also came with uncertain questions. Was this just the start? Who else would they cast aside? How long would it take them to do so? Would do it in the same manner as Issei? Asia shuddered at the thought. Staring off into the horizon, Asia was nervous about the future. She didn't know what it would entail and was scared to find out. The light knock on the door broke Asia from her thoughts. She turned around and saw Arya standing in the doorway. Seeing who it was, Asia turned her head back. She didn't want Arya to see her tear-stained face. Greeted by an empty bed, Arya looked around the room to see where Asia was. Seeing her on the balcony, Arya made her way over, stopping when she reached the doorway leading outside. "Good morning, Asia," Arya stated while doing a curtsy. "I see you have recovered enough to walk. That's good." "Yeah," Asia replied. "Though I'm not back to 100%, I can move around with little difficulty." "That's good to hear," Arya began. "Unfortunately, as much I would like you to rest for a few more days, I need you to come with me. My master wished for you to speak with him as soon as you were able to walk, and as my master, I have no choice but to obey his wishes." "Okay, I understand," Asia conceded. "Just give me a few minutes and I'll meet you outside my room." "Very well. I shall wait for you. Be as quick as possible, there's no time to waste." Agreeing with the wish of her patient, Arya swiftly exited the room leaving Asia alone once again. Closing her eyes, Asia whispered to herself as tears ran down her face as she thought about Issei. It pained her to think about it, but what pained Asia even more was the thought of moving on, but she had to come to terms with reality. Issei was gone. And he wasn't coming back. "Issei, I know I'm the last person who deserves this, but I hope that you can forgive me." Asia looked up into the sky as the receding sunlight touched her face. "Wherever you are." Repetitive. That's the word Azazel would use to describe his life. Having lived for thousands of years, the leader of the fallen angels had seen it all. He was kicked out of heaven, becoming the first fallen angel and establishing the Gregory. He had seen people rise and fall from glory. Lastly, perhaps the most repetitive of all is the countless battles and wars Azazel took part in. Some were bigger than others, but they always ended in the same few ways every time. After some point, everything in life just became so redundant to him. Even the Great War became a chore after going on for so long, especially when word of two dragons fighting a reckless battle circled around. The Gregory's losses were not worth whatever reward awaited the winner at the end. They were the smallest of the three factions at the time by a large margin. Azazel didn't need them all dying before his faction could get off the ground. So, he pulled the fallen angels out of the war, fearing more unnecessary blood would be shed. His intuition served him right. When their battle was interrupted in the realm of the dead, the heavenly dragons attacked the three factions. They were so powerful that the Great War was stopped and the three factions had to band together to defeat them. The original four great Satans were killed and God had to sacrifice himself to seal away the dragons into sacred gears. It was a war where nobody won. By this point, Azazel had enough of war, becoming a die-hard pacifist, trying to avoid fighting when he could. With the war ending, the fighting turned into a stalemate with small skirmishes being the only thing to worry about. With all this free time in his hands, Azazel started working on something that interested him. Artificial sacred gears. At last, Azazel found something that filled a void in his dull life. He spent countless hours researching, creating, and tinkering with sacred gears. Just the thought of sacred gears excited him. They weren't as powerful as the real deal, but Azazel was content with his creations. Both the successes and failures. When Azazel caught wind of the Devil's civil war, he told the fallen angels to not get involved in any way, shape, or form. He did not need or want to clean up the mess his subordinates would inevitably make if they interfered. This was the Devil's problem, and fallen angel interference would only complicate the matter. Besides that, Azazel was so engrossed in sacred gears that he honestly couldn't care less about the civil war. All he cared about was his research. When the civil war was over, Azazel begrudgingly visited Lilith, the new devil capital, to meet the new leaders of the underworld, along with his second-in-command Shemhazai. The four new Satans exchanged pleasantries with the governor, but the latter felt somewhat disconnected from them. While certainly not young, none of the new Satans were even a millennium old when they took their respective titles. To Azazel, they were still children. Once the meeting had concluded, Azazel once again absorbed himself into his research of sacred gears. He had made so much progress in making a sacred gear that could be useful to him. He was so close. But everything changed once Azazel found a young boy beaten nearly to death. He wasn't sure why the boy was there or why he was beaten so badly, but he knew he couldn't just leave him there. So, he took the boy back to the Grigori to fix him up. While patching him up, Azazel asked what had happened to him. While initially hesitant, the boy, who revealed himself to be named Vali, spoke while Azazel listened. Vali talked about how he was abused by his father, Razavin, who would beat him nearly every day. How his mother would do his best to take care of him when his father wasn't around only for her to be abused too. And one day when his father was beating him once again, Vali finally asked him. Why? Why did his father beat him all the time? Why did he make his son's life a living hell? The closest thing Vali got as a response was his father mumbling something about a longinus under his breath all the while he continued to assault his son. Vali was sick of it. He couldn't take it anymore. So he ran away. After hearing this, Azazel couldn't fathom what this child had just revealed. A part of him wanted to deny it. There was no way someone would do this to a child, much less their own son. Taking another look at the boy in front of him, Azazel came to terms with the situation he found himself in. This boy came from a toxic environment and needed someone to be there. He needed a father. Making up his mind, Azazel slowly extended his hand toward the boy sitting in front of him. Reflexively, Vali curled up into a ball, begging Azazel not to hurt him. Seeing this response made Azazel's heart hurt even more. Vali's eyes were sealed shut as tears streamed down his face. He didn't want to get hurt again. If he did, it would be as if he never left his home in the first place. But there was nothing he could do. As far as he knew, he was trapped here and didn't know where the exit was. This was it, he was going to be beaten again and taken back to his. Vali's negative thoughts were suddenly interrupted when he felt something rubbing the top of his head. He would chalk this up to more abuse, but to his surprise, it didn't hurt. Rather, it felt soothing and eased his mind ever so slightly. Curious as to what was causing it, Vali opened his eyes, and what he saw made him freeze. Azazel was patting his head and gave Vali a loving smile. He didn't know how to react, he sat there frozen as Azazel continued rubbing his head. After what felt like forever, Azazel said something that moved Vali to his core. I can't leave you to fend for yourself now, can I? I'll take you in and raise you as my own, be the father that you never had. I will help you learn all there is to know about this world and the longinus that dwells inside you. You can stay here with me. That is, of course, if you want to, I won't force you. But I promise to make you the strong longinus user this world has ever seen. To say that the Silverette was shocked would be an understatement. He never thought in a million years that he would hear that from someone other than his mother. Well, the thought of having a father figure excited the boy, he couldn't help but be worried. What would happen to his mother? Would she be okay? What would his father do her now that he was gone? These questions swarmed his mind, but he also thought about the other side of the coin. If he stayed with Azazel, he would learn about how to properly use his power and learn about his longinus. His father never gave him any training, so Vali was completely clueless about what he could do. Not to mention, if he learned how to use his powers, Vali would be strong enough to face his father. He could save his mother. The answer was clear as day to Vali. But the small, almost undetectable nod, Vali wished to stay with Azazel, and the latter couldn't be happier for the chance to raise a child. As the years passed, Vali grew to be a fearsome warrior with a strong desire to fight stronger opponents. It was revealed that his longinus was the fabled divine dividing, much to Azazel's surprise. Considering that Azazel had taken a special interest in dragons, what were the chances that his son was the host of the Vanishing Dragon? Despite being the one who raised him, Azazel didn't know much about Vali's life before he adopted him. He did however find out that his grandfather was Rizavum Lucifer, son of one of the 4 great Satans. Azazel knew that this was most likely Vali's most profound and darkest secret, so he kept the information to himself. He also learned that Rizavum had killed his Razavin shortly after Vali ran. The fallen angel was shocked, to say the least. Nevertheless, Azazel was grateful for the chance to raise him, considering having a kid of his own would be next to impossible. When Vali turned 18, Azazel enlisted him as an agent of Grigori and as his personal bodyguard. While most people would think that Vali may be a bit young to start that kind of work, Azazel thought differently. Vali was more than ready. With his immense demonic powers combined with Albion's power, he was a force to be reckoned with. The time Azazel had spent raising and watching Vali grow was Azazel was grateful to have. Being able to be the father that he always wanted to be. Azazel never thought he would get that kind of experience again. But fate has something different in store for him. It came to his attention that in a small town in Japan, the heiress to the Gremory household had her peerage stationed there. That was mildly interesting to the fallen angel, but what piqued his interest was the rumor of a human she recently reincarnated was the host of the Red Dragon Emperor, Drake. This excited Azazel. The chance of being able to meet not one, but both heavenly dragons, was all Azazel needed to scout this newly turned devil out. Upon first inspection, Azazel had to admit that he was underwhelmed when he observed the boy training with his peerage. Well, it was true that he was indeed the Red Dragon Emperor, it was only in title. The boy, Issei Haidu, could only summon the gauntlet of his sacred gear, being able to only boost a few times before reaching his limit. He hadn't even achieved Balance Breaker yet. Azazel knew that if Issei and Vali were to face each other in their current states, Issei would lose. There was no chance of him winning. Vali would hand his ass to him on a silver platter. Azazel turned around, readying himself to teleport away, however, something made him stop. Similar to Vali, Azazel felt the inclination to help Issei out. It wasn't as strong as when he met Vali, but he felt something parental towards Issei. So, he approached Issei to give him some advice. Issei, who didn't know this person was initially treated Azazel with hostility, which the fallen angel had expected. Nevertheless, Azazel gave him some pointers before leaving. When Azazel saw Issei again at the Peace Treaty Conference, he looked a little stronger than last time. Not strong enough to summon his Balance Breaker on his own, but definitely stronger. When the Chaos Brigade attacked, Azazel gave Issei a bracelet to help him call upon his Balance Breaker, believing it would be needed for the upcoming fight. His intuition once again served him right. After decimating Kateria, a member of the Old Satan faction and a descendant of Leviathan, Vali revealed himself to be the one who leaked the location of the conference to the Chaos Brigade. Azazel wasn't upset at Vali's betrayal, rather he was amused, almost as if he knew something like this would happen. He knew Vali desired to fight strong opponents, and the Chaos Brigade was the perfect outlet to let him do that. Regardless, he was the enemy right now, and Azazel wasn't exactly in the best condition to fight. But he didn't need to. Issei stepped up in his place. Donning his Balance Breaker with the help of the bracelet, Issei could go toe-to-toe with Vali, even if it was for a short time. Issei was even able to steal Vali's Divine Dividing and use it in conjunction with the boosted gear. Azazel wasn't just surprised, he was impressed. Never had he seen one of the heavenly dragons steal the power of the other. Not to mention Azazel had never seen a Red Dragon Emperor get so upset about a girl's assets getting smaller, they're able to boost dozens upon dozens of times. Just like Vali, Azazel knew Issei was special, and with Vali indirectly quitting being an agent, Azazel suddenly had a lot of time to train Issei to become stronger. The others in his peerage interested Azazel as well, but Issei interested him the most. While Issei was around Vali's age, he still had a long way to go if he ever wanted to be Vali's equal someday. With Azazel's guidance, Issei became exponentially stronger and accomplished so much since then. He was closer to Vali now more than ever. If Issei and Vali were to fight now, Azazel genuinely wasn't sure who would win. Azazel felt nothing but pride and was proud of both Issei and Vali's accomplishments. However, an issue arose. An issue Azazel didn't expect. The interactions between Issei and his friends were off. Azazel couldn't explain it, but after Issei had defeated Rizavim, everyone around him abruptly changed. The fallen angel first became aware of this when Issei confided in him about the matter. Every time Issei tried to talk to Riaz, Akeno, or anyone else, they all tried to get away from him as soon as possible. Every time anyone passed by Issei they would either give a half-hearted response or ignore him entirely. After a couple of days of back and forth, Issei suddenly stopped talking to Azazel, which raised the fallen angel's suspicions. Something was fishy, and Azazel was determined to find out what was causing it. He racked his brain for hours, trying to find any sort of reason why they would all stop talking with Issei. And why all at the same time. He could see one, maybe two of them turning a blind eye due to Issei's insensitivity at times, but everyone at the same time. No, this was something else. Normally Azazel wouldn't get so involved with something that looked like a simple problem on the surface level. But Azazel couldn't shake this off. Something was definitely wrong. He wanted to ask Vali if he knew anything, but the vanishing dragon went to Asgard to be taught magic by Odin, and Azazel didn't know when he'd be back. So he decided to take matters into his own hands. Azazel decided to make his way to the Gremory estate to see if he could get some insight into the issue by talking to Riaz herself. However, when the fallen angel landed at the gates of the estate, the first red flags already started to show. Halt. One of the two guards shouted, moving his spear to block the gate. Lord Serziches ordered none are to be allowed into the estate without his expressed permission. What? Azazel questioned. When did that become a rule? I need to speak with Riaz, it's important. No passage shall be allowed. Why though? I heard you the first time. Azazel deadpanned. I'm telling you that I need to talk to Riaz. It's about Issei. Azazel immediately regretted mentioning Issei as the two guards doubled down on not letting the governor inside. And we're telling you that no passage will be granted without Serzich's approval. If you wish to enter, talk to him. Any attempt to do so without it will be seen as trespassing. The fallen angel exhaled heavily through his nose. Not like you actually could stop me if I really wanted to. Azazel was starting to get annoyed. Since when was this a thing? Upon request, he was always allowed into the Gremory estate after the peace treaty was signed. This only convinced Azazel even more that something wasn't right. He wanted to barge into the estate and question Riaz but couldn't. As the leader of the fallen angels, doing so would bring negative consequences to the entire race. Even more so considering this was Amahu's home. Azazel wasn't ready to go that far. Yet. Azazel sighed. Fine. Just tell me where I can find Surziches and I'll be on my way. The guard stood there in silence, seemingly unwilling to even tell Azazel about Surzich's whereabouts. Azazel had enough. You know what? Don't even bother. I'll figure out where he is on my own and get his approval. Turning to leave, Azazel glanced back at the two one last time. Once I return, the gates better be wide open. For a brief moment, the eyes of the fallen angel glowed an ominous purple, sending dread down the guard's spine. Turning his head back around, Azazel thought about where the former Gremory could be, and one place automatically came to mind. Lilith. While the defeat of Rizavam was momentous, Azazel knew that the Mayu had to deal with the aftermath of the battle, and considering that he wasn't at the Gremory estate, the capital was the only other logical place he could be. Azazel considered teleporting straight there as he felt an unusual sense of urgency. Ultimately, he decided to fly there instead. Lilith wasn't too far from the Gremory estate, and Azazel needed some time to think about what he would say. Unraveling his wings, Azazel took to the skies, making a beeline toward the capital. Thoughts raced through his mind as he got more and more worried. Why is this happening? This is supposed to be a time of celebration, damn it. Something isn't right, and if my guess is right, it has to do with Isay. Azazel flew faster as he saw the shadow of the capital on the horizon. The retreating sun started to slip underneath it, blanketing the entire underworld in darkness. Don't worry, Isay. Once we iron this out, we'll play games at my place. I'll make sure of it. Stealing his determination, Azazel sped across the sky, arriving in the capital in no time. Landing not too far away from his destination, Azazel started making his way to the citadel at the center of the city that housed all government-related operations and hopefully Surziches. As Azazel walked down the street, he noticed that there were barely any people out and about. Azazel could understand if this was a backwater village or town in the countryside, but this was the capital. It should be bustling with people crowding the streets. Only there wasn't. The people present were minimal and not at all like how the capital typically was, even more so at the heart of the capital, where some of the best shops and restaurants were located. After noticing that initial abnormality, Azazel started picking up on other things. While there was barely anyone out, the ones that were acted strange. Most had a sulking and uncomfortable look on their face, walking at a faster pace than what was considered normal. As Azazel pondered this, he accidentally bumped into a woman, causing her to fall to the ground. Sorry about that. Azazel reacted. I didn't see you there. Extending his hand, Azazel tried to help the woman up, but she didn't accept it. She abruptly stood up and shuffled past Azazel, not making so much as a peep. Hey. Wait. Azazel attempted to get the woman's attention but failed. She shuffled past the fallen angel and quickly turned the next corner. Now Azazel was more confused than ever. That was some random woman. She had nothing to do with Isay at all. Why was she acting so suspiciously? The fact that Azazel didn't know the answers only added to his confusion. He's a genius. An insane genius, but a genius nonetheless. He could solve anything thrown his way. But this? He couldn't figure out a plausible solution. It frustrated the fallen angel to no end. He wasn't even sure if suspiciously was the right word to describe her. Everyone else was acting the same way. As much as the irrational side of Azazel wanted to believe they were all in on something, his rational side told him no. The chances of all these people in on whatever is happening is statically impossible. That made Azazel feel ever so slightly better. If they aren't directly involved with what's happening with Isay, then this may be a byproduct of what happened to him. Azazel looked toward the citadel that towered over everything else, touching the sky. There's only one way to find out. Focusing back on his original goal, Azazel made his way to the citadel, ready to unload all the questions he had for the Mayu. Approaching the gate to the citadel, he saw that one again, it was sealed shut. Azazel continued forward, speaking curtly to the guard that was stationed in front of it. I'm here to see Surziches. Thinking this would be a repeat of what happened at the Gremory estate, Azazel prepared himself. However, to his surprise, the exact opposite happened. Very well. Accepting his request, the guard turned around. Putting his hand up, the guard undid the seal on the gate. As the seal faded away, the guard pushed the gate open and turned back around to face Azazel. You may proceed. The guard moved back to his original position as Azazel thought about what just happened. He had expected some form of resistance, but instead, he was being let in. It was skeptical, to say the least. Walking past the guard and through the gate, Azazel walked across the courtyard, going through the massive front doors of the citadel. Looking around, Azazel saw that was no one there either. Not a single person was present in the lobby, serving to put the fallen angel more on edge. Except for one. Across the lobby, sitting at a desk, was a woman in a suit. She had brown hair wrapped in a tight bun and glasses on her face that Azazel knew were just for show. Lastly, she had a stack of papers piled next to her on the desk that she is working on, grabbing the next piece of paper from the top of the stack. Azazel concluded that she was the receptionist. Walking over to her, the fallen angel opened his mouth to speak, but the receptionist beat him to it. "Good afternoon, Azazel." The woman spoke. "Serziches is waiting for you in his office. Please take the elevator to the 50th floor." Pointing toward the elevator behind her, the woman promptly returned to her paperwork. Puzzled by her tone, Azazel raised his eyebrow in confusion. Her greeting was certainly uncalled for. It wasn't unnecessarily a rude greeting, but it sure wasn't a pleasant one either. Pushing the thought aside for now, Azazel found it odd that she already knew why he was there. Looking up and reading his puzzled look, the woman spoke once again. "The guard stationed at the gate informed me you were coming if that's what you're wondering. Now if that is all, please leave me be. I have much work to do." "Wait." Before the woman could resume her work, she was interrupted by Azazel. She looked up once again to the fallen angel, waiting for him to continue. "What's happening out in the capital? There's barely anyone out on the street." The woman gave the fallen angel a confused look. "I'm sorry, Azazel, I'm not sure I understand what you mean." "Rizivim has just been defeated," Azazel elaborated. "This should be a time of celebration, not seclusion." The woman looked into the fallen angel's eyes, thinking about a response. After a moment, she spoke. "It's as you said, Azazel, Rizivim has been defeated. Well, there's certainly some celebration in order, it won't happen now. Victory has been achieved, but not without losses. People's homes are destroyed, families have been torn apart, and everyone is unsure of what's going to happen next. When looking from that perspective, it's clear why people are acting the way they are." "I understand that," Azazel assured. "But what I saw out it is different, something's off. As I walked the streets, I felt the most unsettling and uneasy tension I've had in a long time. Something is going on in the shadows." The woman let out an exasperated sigh as she grabbed her pen. "You're overthinking this, Azazel. Everyone is still shaken up about the recent events. I'm sure in due time, we will gain some sense of normalcy. Now please, make your way to Serziches, Azazel. I'm sure he will have more answers than I can offer. I have one question to ask you. It's about Isay." The woman's eyes sharpened as she looked into the fallen angel's eyes as she ever so slightly tensed up. "The Red Dragon Emperor? What about him?" Azazel noticed this and withheld his tongue briefly. He remembered how the guards acted when he talked about Isay and didn't want to get the same reaction. Thinking carefully about his wording, he spoke. "Isay has been having certain issues as of late. He has been confiding in me about, and I've been helping him the best I can. However, he suddenly went radio silent. I've been trying to reach him for the past few days and I've gotten no response. I know you don't know Isay personally, but I'm running out of options. Do you know anything that has happened to or around Isay?" The woman stayed silent. "Anything at all?" The silence continued to follow until the woman gave her answer. "I'm sorry, Azazel. I don't have anything that could be of use to you. I must get back to my work now. Please make your way to Serziches." Quickly answering his question, the woman brought her down to face her paperwork and continued her work. If he was being honest with himself, Azazel didn't expect much of anything when he asked his question. What piqued his interest, however, was the way the receptionist spoke. She sounded as though she was rushing. He debated on pushing her for more information, but ultimately decided not to. He didn't need to start something unnecessary with her, and besides, Serziches would have more information than she ever could. "In that case, I'll make my way to him. Thank you for your help." The receptionist remained silent as Azazel went around the large desk and made his way to the elevator. As the doors to the elevator opened, Azazel walked in and scanned the choice of buttons. His office is on the top floor, go figure. As the elevator doors closed, Azazel heard a noise coming from the lobby. Quickly looking through the smaller and smaller space between the doors, he saw what it was. The receptionist let out a sigh. "What?" Before Azazel could ponder further, the elevator shut and started its ascension to Serzich's office. That sigh wasn't burdened with work sigh. That sigh was one people make when they get away with a lie. As Azazel waited, he continued to think about what he just saw. "Now that I think about it, she did act strange during our conversation. I figured maybe something else was bothering her, but it's clear now that isn't the case. Did she lie about what she knew about Issei? If she did lie, why would she? Better yet, what does she gain from lying? From what I know so far, she stands to gain nothing from lying. Everyone is acting peculiar. First that woman on the street and now this. Both events happened at the same time, yet they can't be connected, at least not by Issei. One has nothing to do with the other. There's something I'm missing. What is it? Azazel affirmed what he knew deep down to be already true. This can't be a coincidence, something is not right. Azazel looked up and saw he was already on the 50th floor. And I'm about to find out. Stepping out of the elevator, Azazel bared witness to a lavish hall leading to Surzich's office, filled with expensive furniture and paintings. The walls and roof were painted in a deep red with intricate designs scattered across them, while the floor was made out of dark brown marble with red accents. The sound of Azazel's shoes echoed as he walked down the hall toward a set of double doors. Azazel stopped just in front of them to collect his final thoughts. This is it. Taking a deep breath, Azazel pushed the doors open and walked into the office. The office was incredibly furbished, filled with the most expensive items money can afford. Beautiful paintings and ornaments covered the walls. The backside of the office had a giant window that overlooked the entire capital. Like everything else in the citadel, decorated with most outrageously expensive things money can buy. Shaking his head, Azazel disapproved of Surzich's more than luxurious office. Sure, he had some nice things back in his office back at the Grigori, but it didn't hold a candle to how much was crammed in this office. Well, I shouldn't be surprised, Azazel muses. Devils in general like to convey the status and power they possess. It makes them feel superior to others and bolsters their pride. Surzich's is the embodiment of that tenfold, so I shouldn't be shocked. Speaking of Surzich's. Looking towards the massive desk, placed in the middle of the room, Azazel saw a red leather chair, and in it Surzich's. Welcome, Azazel. Surzich's warmly stated. My receptionist told me you came here to speak with me. Please come and take a seat. Gesturing at the seat on the other side of the desk, Surzich's clasped his hands and rested them on top of his desk as he waited for Azazel. The fallen angel had all his walls up now. The greeting felt eerily normal and rattled his nerves. He expected a more curt greeting from the Mau, especially considering that Azazel was almost sure Surzich's knew why he was there. No thanks, Surzich's. Azazel declined as he walked over and stood in front of the desk. I'd rather stand. Surzich's shrugged his shoulders. If you insist. Now, what is it you wanted to talk to me about? Before Azazel could even bring up Issei, instinctually his eyes scanned Surzich's desk, which was littered with papers. A lot more papers than Azazel was expecting. What are these documents, Surzich's? They can't all be from the battle with Rizavam. What's on them? Oh, these. Pay them no mind. Surzich's smiled as he moved the papers off his desk and into a drawer away from view. Just some new ideas the other mouse and I have been working on. Azazel couldn't help but notice Surzich's suspicious behavior. A part of him wanted to see what details those documents held, but he disregarded the idea. He couldn't forget the reason he was here. Never mind. Azazel disregarded. I came here to talk to you about Issei and the attitude your sister's peerage has toward him. Azazel decided to not beat around the bush and directly asks the Mo about the situation. There was no point in dancing around the problem. Surzich's raised an eyebrow. What do you mean by that, Azazel? Surzich's questioned. From what I've seen, Riaz hasn't been acting unusual. The frown began to form on the fallen angel's face as he listened to the Mau. Surely you can't be oblivious to what I'm talking about. A couple of days ago Issei began to share how Riaz's peerage abruptly began treating him differently a few days after Rizavam's defeat. It wasn't a subtle change either. Issei shared how he was neglected and flat out ignored by his fellow peerage members. Surzich's stayed quiet with his eyes looking up to the fallen angel. The latter didn't know if he wasn't saying anything because he was unsure of what to say or if he waiting for him to finish. Regardless, Azazel took the opportunity to continue. And that's not all. I went to your estate about an hour ago to check up on Issei myself, and the guards denied my entry, saying I had to gain permission from you. Since when was that required? Surzich's responded immediately, bringing his hands up below his nose. Tensions are still high despite Rizavam being gone, Azazel. I'm sure they were just being diligent to ensure the safety of my family and staff that reside in my home. I can also assure you that Issei is fine. He's just tired after the fight, the fatigue had caught up to him. Azazel wasn't buying it. If he's fine, then why am I not allowed to see him? Azazel retorted. Moreover, it doesn't explain why he went silent so suddenly or why his friends are treating him like they are. Azazel leaned forward, placing his hands on the Mau's desk. I demand to see him. Surzich's face contorted slightly as he listened to the fallen angel. I understand you want to see him, Azazel, but don't speak to me like that. I'm not one of your fallen angels that you can order around. You're making this bigger deal than it needs to be. I'm telling you that Issei is fine, and I'll tell him to contact you when he wakes up." Azazel finally had enough. He stepped away from the desk and crossed his arms. "Why the hell are you acting like this?" Serziches was about to once again comment on Azazel's harsh tone, but the latter continued to speak. "You and everyone and everything that surrounds you have been acting suspiciously. First, it was the guards at your estate, then upon my arrival the capital is dead. No one is walking about and the ones that act skittish and afraid. Your secretary is acting strange and now you. All I wanted to do is see Issei, but apparently, the process to do that is equivalent to fighting Great Red. Answer me, Serziches." Azazel's eyes bored into the Mayu's as his own glowed an ominous purple. "What is going on?" Serziches rose from his seat, meeting the fallen angel face to face. "Who do you think you're talking to, Azazel? You might be able to do that with those that work under you, but that isn't going to work with me. If you wish to talk to me, do it with respect." Azazel threw his hands in the air as he let out an irritated sigh. He thought he was prepared for what Serziches could say, but the fallen angel underestimated just how arrogant the Mayu could be. "What do you want me to say?" "I'm sorry. Don't get your panties in a twist and grow up." The Mayu exhaled heavily through his nose. "That's rich coming from you. You were such a playboy a couple of thousand years ago. You couldn't keep your hands off women even if you wanted to. I, on the other hand, have a little more dignity than that. I represent one of the three factions. I am Mo. For one, Serziches. For once, don't let your ego and pride get in the way. Pull the stick out of your ass and be a reasonable person." "Look who's talking." Serziches sneered. "You barge in here with little to no notice and talk to me in this pretentious tone. If I wanted to, I could send you away right now." "I won't be," Azazel curtly stated. "Not until you let me see Issei." Azazel started to unconsciously flare his aura. He didn't mean to unleash it, but the Mo had gotten under his skin enough. Seeing this, Serziches did the same. A dark red cloud consumed the Mo as he stared into the eyes of the leader of the Grigori. "Think very carefully about what you do next, Azazel," Serziches warned. "Or you might just wake up back at the Grigori with no clue of how you got there." While only a few seconds passed in reality, it felt like an eternal standoff between the devil and fallen angel. The two stayed silent as they continued to stand in place. The office started to shake, struggling to withstand the combined pressure of the two leaders. Both waited for the other to speak. One misinterpretation. One misunderstanding could lead to hell. Literally. Before things could escalate any further, a light knock was heard at the door before it was opened, and a small group walked in. Ajuka and Serafol came walking in with Beelzebub in the forefront. "Good afternoon, Serziches, we came just like you asked. Ajuka cut himself off as he saw the situation in front of him. Serziches shifted his attention to his fellow Mo along with Azazel. "What's happening here?" the Mayu questioned as he stepped forward. "Were you two about to fight?" Azazel, already annoyed from his altercation with the Crimson Satan, harshly answered Ajuka's query. "We were in the middle of something, Ajuka. How did you not feel our auras through the wall?" The walls in the citadel block the pressure that auras give off. It was made to withstand the forces of all three factions combined. Ajuka shook his head, realizing he was getting sidetracked. "That's besides that point. Why are you here, Azazel? Better yet, why were you about to attack a Mo? You do realize what repercussions that entails, correct? We just finished our battle with Rizavam, we don't need you starting another war." Azazel balled his fists before relaxing them repeatedly. He honestly didn't expect this situation to happen. For the first time in a long time, he was pissed. Still, the fallen angel kept his cool as responded to the green Satan. "I'm not going to start another war over this. That's something a dragon would do, but damn it, I'm at my wit's end here." Serziches said nothing as his aura continued to spin around him, looking toward the fallen angel. Puzzled, Ajuka spoke. "Wit's end? What do you mean, Azazel?" Before Ajuka could say anything else, Serafal stole his spotlight as she hopped in front of her fellow Mo. "Yeah, why are you upset, Ozzy? I know Serzi can be a little cruel sometimes, but he's a good person, why would you want to fight him?" The fallen angel's head pounded as a migraine formed in his head. Listening to these fools was giving him a headache. I swear. Their wording and phrasing may be different, but they all spew the same lines. It's as if they're the same. Azazel took a deep breath, deciding to ignore what he could only describe as Serafal's attempted mockery. "If you must know, I'll give you a quick summary. Issei has been having issues and talking to me about them. Just yesterday he went radio silent. After waiting until today, I went to Serzich's estate to visit but was denied entry. I've come here to get said permission, but Serzich's will not let me see Issei. Every time I ask him why I can't, he just waves me off. All of his excuses amount to him dodging and evading the question. So, if you guys would help me get Serzich's to open his eyes and bring him back to reality, I'd greatly appreciate it." Ejuka and Seraphil looked at each other before giving their response. Ejuka decided to speak for both of them because Seraphil sometimes didn't think about what she said before saying it. I'm sorry Azazel, but we don't have the means to help you here. If Serziches doesn't want you entering his home, that is his decision to make. You don't have any reason to distrust him. I have every reason to distrust him right now, Azazel retorted. Ejuka sighed as his gaze briefly went to the floor before looking back up at the fallen angel. I'm not sure what else to you Azazel, Serziches has the final say on what you can and can't do when it comes to his home. The golden sigil appeared on the ground before Azazel could respond. A golden light engulfed the room for a brief moment before it died down. Everyone looked back where the sigil had appeared to see Michiel standing there. A soft smile was present on his face before it abruptly turned to a soft frown upon seeing the situation. Noticing the auras Serziches and Azazel were producing, he directed his attention toward them. Are you two okay? What's going on here? I can assure you that whatever's happening is simply a misunderstanding. Seeing Michiel here only served to annoy the fallen angel even further. Just my luck. God really must have held disdain for me when he kicked me out of heaven. I don't see how this could have happened otherwise. Not bothering to explain the situation for a third time, Azazel turned his attention back to the person he originally came here to speak to. Serziches. So? Are you going to let me see a say or not? Azazel spoke in a deadpan tone, he was so tired of the bullshit the Mohs and Seraph were spewing. He honestly just wanted it to end. Absolutely not. Serziches responded. After that act you just displayed, I think it would do you some good to have some time to yourself. To sort out your thoughts. Serziches extended 2 fingers forward and swiped a wave of magic at the door, causing it to open. Once you can talk in a civilized manner, we can revisit this discussion. You may see yourself out. Azazel looked at Serziches before looking behind him to view the other Moh and Michiel. He sighed, knowing that he couldn't press on with this, not with the others here. If things got out of hand, they would surely gang up on him for acting crazy, even though it was Serziches who was acting like he just killed somebody. The fallen angel was at least satisfied to know that it wasn't just the Serziches, the other leaders as well were acting strange. It wasn't time yet, which was fine by the Azazel, he could bide his time. He would get his answers, one way or another. Azazel didn't say a word. He turned around, passing the other Moh and Michiel. Slamming the door behind him, Azazel called the elevator before descending back to the ground floor. After he was sure Azazel had left, Ejuka turned to face the Crimson Satan. You really shouldn't have let him rile you up like that Serziches. Ejuka lectured. He may or may not be aware of what's to come. Serziches let out an exasperated sigh as he responded to his fellow Moh. I'm aware Ejuka, however, I don't regret saying what I said. He challenged me and my authority, I had a responsibility to defend it. Michiel sat on one of the sofas in the room before speaking himself. Azazel is too attached to his say for his good. It would have been nigh impossible to persuade him into helping us. The Moh nodded as they listened to the Seraph's words. Speaking of which, Ejuka began, turning his head back to Serziches. Is it time Serziches? The Crimson Satan closed his eyes before quickly inhaling and exhaling through his nose. Opening his eyes, he answered Ejuka's question. Yes, it's time to make the final adjustments and enact our plan. Seraphil crossed her arms, being serious for once. Have you informed your sister of the plan? Serziches turned his back to his fellow leaders. Looking out the window, Serziches spoke. Partially. Serziches replied. While she knows the end goal, she doesn't know the details. Meanwhile her peerage still has no one idea, assuming she hasn't told them anything. He turned back around with his eyes glowing a sinister red. But that's about to change. I told her that today we would discuss the plan and bring her peerage along with her. Serziches looked across the room at the Moh and Seraph before speaking once again. Are you ready to inform them and prepare? The other leaders all took a glance at one another before all nodding their heads. Seeing this, Serziches nodded as well. Very well. Serziches stated. Plans for Operation Dragonslayer have commenced. Once Riaz and her peerage arrived, we will go into more detail. Azazel walked past the secretary and stormed out the gates of the citadel. The situation as a whole rubbed him the wrong way. Not to mention that he left no answers and more questions. Damn it, that didn't go the way I intended at all. Why did the other have to show up at the worst time possible? Azazel continued to talk to himself as he walked down the dead streets of Lilith. If Serziches won't let me see a say on his own, then I'll do it myself. I don't trust Serziches' word that Issei is alright, especially after that. The fallen angel started to think about how he was going to break in to see the Red Dragon Emperor. In regards to slipping in unnoticed, I believe I still have that device that helps mask one's presence. That combined with my own magic should be more than enough to keep me from being detected. I probably could have gotten away with doing it today, but I'm certain after that discussion, Serziches is going to be on high alert for a bit. I'll give it a few days to let things die down. Once I find Issei, I'll bring him back to the Grigori. After that altercation, I don't trust leaving him in Serzich's care." Azazel stopped walking, looking up to the purple sky of the underworld. "Issei, I'm coming. Just hold out a little bit longer." Bringing forth a magic circle, Azazel transported himself back to the Grigori, set on his plan to save Issei. Unfortunately for him, he would be too late to save his second son. It had been a few days since Azazel visited Lilith to confront Serziches about Issei. He locked himself in the Grigori, determined to get Issei out of the estate. He had found the device he needed and was making last-minute preparations to infiltrate the Gremory estate that night. Unbeknownst to him, his chance would never come. While carrying his masking device, Azazel felt a surge of energy that consumed his entire being. It shocked him so much that he proceeded to drop the device onto the floor, causing it to shatter. What was that? A dreadful feeling arose within Azazel as a lump swelled his throat. It can't be. Azazel whiplashed his head to face the window as he swiftly focused on the energy he felt. His worst fears came true. Issei. Wasting no time, Azazel unraveled his wings before bursting through the windows of his lab. The shockwave destroyed just about everything, but Azazel couldn't care less. All he cared about was who viewed as a son. Issei. Azazel flew faster than he ever thought it could. He flew so fast that he was nothing more than a black speck soaring through the sky to those who could see him. If anyone could see him at all. Azazel tried his best not to panic as he flew faster and faster to where he felt the energy originate. Issei. No, they wouldn't do that. Right. Even this is too much for them. A million thoughts whirled around in the fallen angel's mind as he got closer and closer to his destination. Nearing the site, for a spilled second Azazel saw what looked to be a devil perched on a nearby cliff. He also saw him bring his hand up to his ear, as if he was about to communicate with someone. Azazel knew without a doubt that he was contacting the Mau. Azazel didn't stop for him, he didn't have time. He sped forward, approaching the place where he felt Issei's aura. Felt. Azazel dawned on a haunting realization. Issei's aura. Why don't I feel his presence? A tear ran down Azazel's face as he connected the dots. Looking down, Azazel saw not only the leaders but Riaz and her peerage as well. Azazel divabomed straight toward the ground. As he landed, he gazed coldly at the group, ready to attack at a moment's notice. The sadness that was present seconds prior was now replaced with overwhelming rage. Azazel walked slowly to the group. All the devils and angels looked toward him as he slowly made his way closer to them. The fallen angel kept his eyes trained on Serziches, not letting his eyes waver. Right before reaching the group, Gabriel, Irina, Riaz, and her peerage teleported away, leaving only the Mo and Michiel. A small part of Azazel was puzzled by Gabriel's presence, but a bigger part of him didn't care. He only cared about the pathetic excuse of life that stood before him. Completely ignoring the fact that they were all bloodied and bruised, Azazel monotonously spoke. So, this was your end goal. It took all of Azazel's willpower to not beat Serziches to a pulp in that instant. He waited with no patience to spare as Serziches spoke. Azazel. Serziches began. Let me explain the situation before you. Azazel snapped before Serziches could finish, punching the Mo across the face, causing him to fall to his ground. What the fuck is there to explain? The situation is as clear as day. Not only did you attack Issei completely unprovoked, you also killed him. The other leaders stepped forward ready to subdue the fallen angel if need be, but not before trying to convince them of their story. You have it wrong, Azazel. Ajuka explained. We didn't attack Issei. It was him who attacked us. We tried to talk to him, but everything we said fell on deaf ears. Bullshit. Issei would never attack you guys, even if your dumbasses provoked him. He isn't that type of person. It wasn't him. Seraphil exclaimed. Drake appeared to have taken over Issei's or the very least filled his head with outlandish ideas. He talked about how he was bored and wanted to go back to the days he fought all the time, and all those around him feared him. Azazel turned to face Leviathan, still boiling in anger. Not that I would believe something so obviously made up. But if that was the case, why didn't you just subdue Issei? He didn't die. Michiel spoke up next. Need I remind you, this is the Red Dragon Emperor we're talking about. Subduing isn't an option when we're talking about a being that rivals the three factions combined. Azazel stayed quiet as he absorbed this information. Some parts made sense, but his emotions refused to believe this was the truth. Even if that's the case, you didn't consult me about it. Surely you must have seen the signs. Especially you Serziches, considering he was locked up in your estate like a damn prisoner. We would have told you. Serziches elaborated. But all of this happened all at once, and we didn't have time to inform you. We were just coincidentally together when Issei spontaneously attacked us. Even with all their evidence laid out on the table, Azazel wasn't buying it. No. No. That isn't what happened. You attacked Issei for no apparent reason other than you felt like it. Now you bury the evidence and contort the story to make it something it's not. More of Azazel's aura came forth. He was preparing to take them on. Let's see if you tell the same story after I rip your arms off your bodies. Acting quickly, Serziches used his last resort to dissuade Azazel from attacking. You don't want to do this, Azazel. If you attack us unprovoked, all of our allies will turn against you and the fallen angels. Your entire race would be wiped out over something that could have been completely avoided. Even if we did attack Issei, first there's no evidence to suggest that we did. Everyone you'd tell would be going completely off of hearsay, which wouldn't convince them to take the drastic you'd want. Azazel's eyes widened slightly as he listened to the Mo. Seeing this, Serziches doubled down on the point to dissuade Azazel even further. Is that what you want for your people, Azazel? For them to be killed over nothing? I think deep down you know that isn't what you want. So please, if not for your allies, do it for your kin. Serzich's point had reached Azazel, but for the wrong reason. The fallen angel was so focused and absorbed in freeing Issei that he neglected to set up any safety measures for his people. If he attacked now, all fallen angels would be killed by the end of the month. He had but one choice to make. Remaining silent, Azazel summoned a magic circle and teleported away, leaving the Mo and Seraphs on their lonesome. The group stayed silent for a couple of seconds until one spoke. It worked. Serziches looked toward the sky as he howled in laughter. It worked. He turns around to face everyone while wearing his trademark condescending smirk. Azazel bought it. Ajuka got the attention of Serziches to remind them that they weren't done. Yes. He bought it for now. Ajuka admitted. But there are still some things that need to get done before we can say we're finished. Agreeing with Ajuka, Serziches wiped the smirk off his face and became serious once again. You're right, Ajuka, there's still some odds and ends to take care of. Stand close to me, we're going to my estate. We'll discuss our next course of action there. Huddling around the Crimson Satan, Serziches transported them to the estate where they would discuss the next stage of their plan. Azazel transported himself back to his ruined lab with his gaze down toward the floor. Erg. The fallen angel let out a pain-filled scream as he slammed his hand on his desk, splitting the mostly intact desk into two. Why? Why did this have to happen? Azazel sat down on the only remaining intact chair in his lab. Cradling his face in his hands, Azazel started to shake uncontrollably as quiet sobs echoed and filled the room. Azazel wanted nothing more than to march to Lilta and rip Serzich's heart out. But what pained him was that Serziches was right. By attacking the devils he would endanger the lives of his fallen angels, regardless of whether or not they fought. Azazel was out of options. He didn't know what to do. Issei had become such an integral part of his life, and to have abruptly taken away traumatized a fallen angel. What remained was a shell of the former Azazel. The spunky, quick-witted, and sometimes perverted fallen angel was now replaced with a depressed, gloomy, and lamenting father. Azazel slumped his chair as he recalled the memories he and Issei had made together. It had been a little over a month since Issei's death, and Azazel had made any attempts whatsoever to move on. He kept himself locked in his lab, not uttering a peep to anyone. By this point, the word of Issei's death had made its rounds, circling the underworld several times over. Despite this, Azazel was fairly certain that Vali didn't know yet, considering he had been in Asgard. On one hand, Azazel wanted to be the one to tell Vali about his rival's death, but at the same didn't want Vali to know. He knew more than anyone how much Issei meant to the Vanishing Dragon, and if he found out he'd be devastated. Alas, Azazel knew he couldn't keep the truth hidden from him forever. It'd only be a matter of time before Vali found out about Issei. The door to Azazel's lab opened, disrupting the fallen angel's train of thought. Lazily looking toward the door, his bloodshot eyes widened as he saw who it was. Hey old man. I'm back from training. The Vanishing Dragon then noticed the trashed lab that Azazel was sitting in. Seeing this, he questioned the fallen angel. Why's your lab a mess? And why do you look like shit? Vali crossed his arms as he stared at Azazel with concern and worry. Well, I'm waiting. Azazel sighed, he knew couldn't wait any longer. If he didn't tell him, someone else would. Preparing himself, Azazel told Vali about everything that happened over the last month. How the Moos and Seraphs acted suspiciously, how Lilith looked deserted, and how died at the hands of those who he thought were his family. As he finished, Azazel looked up at Vali, waiting for his reaction. The Vanishing Dragon said nothing at first, his hair casting a shadow over his eyes. He could tell that Azazel was being serious. Desperately, Vali tried to feel for Dryag's aura in an attempt to locate Issei, but came up with nothing. He started to shake as his visage turned into a deep frown. Albion, who also listened, felt the emotions of his host and tried to calm him down. Vali, listen to me. you need to calm down. Albion's plea fell on deaf ears as he looked at Azazel. So? You mean to tell me that Issei has been dead? For over a month? Vali looked up, with anger filling in his eyes. And you have just been sitting here on your ass not to avenge his death, or at the very least prove that he was killed by those pathetic excuses of leaders. What the hell have you been doing last month? Azazel tried to respond. Stop it. Just stop it. I don't want to hear whatever excuse you're about to give me. Vali was livid. Not only did he discover that his brother was dead, he found out that the man he saw as a father figure for most of his life hasn't been anything to avenge Issei's death. Vali, your emotions are spiraling out of control. Get a hold of yourself. Vali wasn't having it. The last thing I need right now is a lecture. Aren't you upset that Issei and Drake are dead? Aren't you angry? Answer me. I'm enraged as well, but acting recklessly won't do us any favors. Albion tried to be the voice of reason that Vali desperately needed, but it wasn't much good as Vali seemed to have his goals set. I think it's time we pay Surziches a visit at his estate. I got some new tricks I would love to show him. Hearing this, Azazel began to beg Vali not to go. No Vali, you can't. If you attack, all of our allies will hunt the fallen angels down, we'll be killed or worst. I wanted to ensure that they would be safe before I attacked, but I couldn't find something that could work. Vali scoffed as listened to the fallen angel. They would be in danger regardless of whether you assured them safety or not. Besides, from what you described, the Mohu have become corrupt and lost in their power. The only way the masses are going to see this is if we show them. We're going. Vali. Both Azazel and Albion tried to change Vali's mind, but it was too late. Summoning a magic circle, Vali sent both himself and Azazel to the gates of the Gremory estate. The guard stationed were caught by surprise when both the White Dragon Emperor and the leader of the Grigori appeared before them. What? They both didn't have any time to react. Vali blasted them away with his magic, blowing the gates off the hinges in the process. Vali practically dragged Azazel along as they got closer to the front doors of the mansion. Hearing the commotion, the Mass and Seraphs who were inside ran out to see a pissed-off dragon and a broken fallen angel. Vali. Surziches called out. What in Lucifer's name are you doing? Shut the hell up, Surziches. Vali snarled. You know exactly why I'm here. Surziches could see it in his eyes and hear it in his voice. Vali knew the truth, the real truth. So you know. Surziches admitted. But so what? No one will believe you, it'll just bolster the claims I've made. I had to take down one rogue dragon, don't make me make it two. I don't give a damn if no one believes me. I know what I'm doing is right. Vanishing dragon balance breaker. Vali. Stop. It's not time yet. Azazel screamed out to the White Dragon Emperor, but it failed to reach him. Sprawling his wings, Vali flew in a spiral formation into the air before beelining towards the group of devils and angels. I'll show you what happens when you kill my rival. Surziches looked up to Vali, who was barreling towards with disinterest as a scoff escaped his mouth. I'll put you in your place, almighty White Dragon Emperor, just like Issei. As the two collided, a powerful shockwave of energy was felt throughout the underworld and parts of the earth as another war was about to ensue. What the hell was that? Meanwhile, in a different part of the underworld, a man garbed in a worn-out cloak was in the process of making his way to Earth. While he may be considered a man by some, those who were of the supernatural knew otherwise. This being is a dragon, a powerful one at that, even if his partner was gone. Being startled by the burst of energy he felt, the man dropped an item that he was carrying that was covered in white cloth. Feeling uneasy for a moment, the man froze before quickly calming down. Something just happened in the underworld, I can feel it. The man, Issei Haidu, continued to stand still, staring at the wrapped-up item. Whatever I felt just now, it's going to change the supernatural. Issei monologued. Regardless, I will not interfere. Issei bent down, picking up his soul possession as a portal opened up in front of him. This is their problem now. Issei walked through the portal, completely unaware of the horror that was soon to come and how the supernatural would change for the worse. That's it, guys. Thanks for watching and supporting us. See you in the next part. Of course, if the author add more chapters.